There's somebody there.
Yeah.
I do that gently, though.
Yes, I thought it was very well done.
It's a tough one to open up.
Because no matter how careful
Someone's going to be.
you are, how you talk about it, someone takes, would take it as a...
As an affront to the program.
Correct. I thought you did it in a very sensitive manner.
Thank you. I'm going to start to look like a board member.
No, it's
See,
an
they're here.
amazing transformation.
All for you.
All for the benefit of the community.
You're my gateway.
That's what's important.
No, you're the gateway. Right? Oh, look. I'm invited to...
I'd like to call this meeting to order. My apologies for being almost 20 minutes late, or over 20 minutes late. There was an executive session regarding a personnel matter, and this meeting is being recorded, audio and video recorded tonight. As we always do, I'd like to open the meeting by saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It appears that everybody is here. We'll start with the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 11th, 2018 meeting?
Second.
Mr. Anderson? I didn't catch who seconded it.
Second.
Oh, Dr. Sedicum. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That was approved unanimously. We'd like to move to our first general public comment. I understand we have a few people signed up.
Yes, we do. Robert Light.
Please state your name and area of residence, Dr. Light.
Thank you. My name is Robert Light, and I'm a resident of Richland Township. I'd like to discuss the future of both Milford and Quakertown elementary schools. Recommendation 1. The site should be maintained by the school district. It's a desirable location, central to present and future school populations. As an existing school building, it has cleared all of the planning and zoning issues which could delay construction of a new school building on another location. There's no question that you're going to be needing additional schools sometime in the future, perhaps not right. I live in Richland Township and did receive our newsletter. I counted 381 single homes that are somewhere very close to being approved. I think about 150 of them are on sites that are going to be that are under construction right now, or at least have been cleared for construction. So that's recommendation number 1. It just makes good sense to keep it. I'm a conservative, and conserving good property is important. Land like that's not going to be available anytime in the future. Assuming that you do keep it, there are two uses that would be appropriate. I was a school board member back in the 1990s, early in this century, and we had there had been a school which was the POF school, which had been the original POF had been constructed in the 1950s. It was no longer adequate. The location was not good, so that school was not necessary for a period of time after we constructed the Trumbarsville School. During a period of about 6 or 8 years, that school was used as a utility building and a warehouse. It worked out very well. You had an employee named Jim Rosh and another one named Charlie Quay, who were masters of getting the right kind of materials to the people at the right time. So that's one use that you could make of it. If there would be a person on duty every day, there would you'd lessen the chance that there might be any kind of vandalism. The second precedent that we have is that of Haycock. There was a time that Haycock was no longer necessary, and Haycock was no longer necessary as a school building for the school district. But for a period, I believe for about 10 years or so, that was leased to the intermediate unit. They had 2 special programs that they placed there. So there are certainly 2 possible uses for Milford, assuming that you are wise and you keep it. The other recommendation that I make is one that you probably has been sort of lost because of all of the interest and all of the other things that are going on. But I'm concerned about the fate of Quakertown Elementary. There had been even some discussion of making that into a early childhood center, which I don't believe is very appropriate. But it's a wonderful school. There are people like me who owe a great deal to that building. That was my high school. I went through the doors that said "Enter to learn" and "Leave to serve." After when what I consider to be the new high school, the school building that is there on Park Avenue in the 1950s, it served for quite a time as a junior high school, and then it was converted into the elementary school. That's the most historic building in the school district. It was constructed in 1929 because at that time people had to, there had to be a vote to approve the cost of construction. Actually were parades and so forth in the community to persuade people to build it. If it had not been built at that time in 1929, it would not have been built because the Depression came along. I want to, so it is important to the community as a monument to our interest in education and to the preservation of good school buildings. I have a friend named Frank Licapoli. Frank, and he's done a lot to preserve things in the school district. He came across an article that was in a newspaper. He had only the article, so it doesn't have the source, but I assume it was the Quakertown Free Press, which was a newspaper that came out once a week. And this is a report. At that time, there was an annual convention of the school board members of the community. At that time, each community had its own school board, so this was a big thing. So they celebrated the 50th anniversary of the School Board Association in Quakertown, what was in the high school. And I'm going to read 2 parts of it to you to demonstrate the historical background. Although the $250,000 Quakertown High School plan is 10 years old, it is still 10 years ahead of any school district in Bucks County in modern conveniences, advantages, and progressiveness. The other comment that I want to make is that there is also a reference to the program that started off. The session started off with a grand concert with the Quakertown High School Community Symphony Orchestra of 28 pieces led by Lowell Borst, a Quakertown native. Mr. Borst was a graduate of Quakertown High School. He went on to become a music teacher, the instrumental music teacher. And he and one of his students wrote the alma mater. He went on then to become a professor at Penn State University. So that there's in the 89 years or so of that building, there's a very great tradition, and you need to bring the upkeep of that school into focus very soon, I think. I'd be glad to try to answer. Yes, Ron.
Yeah. You and I know each other very well, obviously. We're in the Ed Foundation together, so I see you often.
Yes.
I do not want to dismiss lightly anything you're saying here. And Milford especially is a school that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts,
yes,
obviously.
Yes, I have
what we've gone through.
Three grandchildren.
Quakertown as well. I'm sure Haycock as well. You made a comment during your speech, said we would be wise to maintain them.
Yes.
I do not mean to suggest you were implying we would be unwise if we chose to close them, but we have a lot of things to consider.
Yes.
And if we choose to close, if we choose to demolish, I would hope you would acknowledge that we did what we thought was in the best interest of the school district. And the reason I bring this up, you just listed 3 schools, Milford, Haycock, and Quakertown Elementary.
Yes.
I've been reading your books that you're writing with your associate. You've written those books yourself. How many school buildings has this community had over the years, going all the way back to the first several schools? Several. I mean, my point is that there's been lots of schools,
yes,
over the years. Some of them still exist as, shells of buildings, one-room schoolhouses. Aside from Milford, Haycock, and Quakertown Elementary, I doubt anybody else here could even name them. And I'm not trying to minimize the feelings that everybody has today for these schools, but I believe that we need to make the right decision. Yes. And if that's to close the schools, I'll hope you can understand and everybody else in the community can understand. We're not doing it because we don't have feelings for the schools. I'm sure the people who lived back in those times had feelings for their schools when they were closed and shuttered and no longer needed. So I hope you understand that whatever decision we made with the needs of the community at hand, and we're not dismissive of your feelings to these schools.
No, I appreciate that. I served on the school board for 27 years. I was involved in at least 500 school board meetings of this type over the years. So I have an investment, and that investment of my time and my interest in the students in the community is part of the reason. I believe that it is to the best advantage of the students. The students are the final cause of whatever you do. And I believe it is in the best interest of the students to do 2 things. One is to maintain Milford, because it will be needed in the future. We did not, it was at least 20 years, the school board purchased the land for Trimbarsville School at least 20 years before it was built. So you need to make an investment in the future. Maintaining Milford is an investment in the future so that future school board members like you can put a good school in that will serve this community.
We don't, Dr. Light, we don't have any plans at this time of doing anything but keeping that property.
Great. Okay.
So I just wanted to offer you some assurance that that I agree with you that it would be silly for us to get rid of that property, especially for the amount of money that we discussed this, that we would get for it. It makes more sense to keep that as an asset for us for the future.
Well, I apologize if I'm bringing up something that is not appropriate, but there was discussion a year ago of selling that property. There was actually
Was,
discussion
you're
at
right.
that time
Right.
of bulldozing that property.
There's still, that is still open, I will admit, as far as the property is concerned, due to the right of first refusal for the charter schools,
Well,
but if that were to occur, to keep the property itself, the land is,
Yeah.
we don't have any plans to do anything with that.
will the governor sign anything like that? Governor Wolf will never sign it. Maybe somebody else will.
But that doesn't, that's right, maybe somebody else will, and we can't take that risk of letting a charter school go there.
Well, yes. So what the best thing to do is to maintain the property.
Right,
Maintain the property.
I agree.
Yes, if in the future a better school building, that building was also state-of-the-art. That was the first one to be climate controlled. It was built for expansion. It was considered to be a state-of-the-art building when it was built. Thanks, Ron. I appreciate your comments. Any other?
I also pledge that I will never vote to get rid of Quakertown Elementary, just so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Light.
Lisa Flummer?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate the time. It means a lot. Kaylin, I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to do this, because I know how much the kids mean to you and mean to all of us as parents of this community. And I am very grateful. You're welcome. A couple of concerns. Start with the biggest one. Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa Flummer, Richland Township. One of the biggest concerns my daughter has brought up to me, she is at Strayer. She's 8th grade, and has said to me on a number of occasions that she is not happy with the school lunches. No flavor. They taste like they're soft or overbaked, or there's just like nothing there. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, does it taste like cardboard? You know, I'm trying to get her to give me some ideas. So my question is, does that come from it being outsourced, where Quakertown didn't keep it? And I'm like, is there going to be anything that we can do in the future to make the kids encourage them to eat more of that? Because she'll come home and she'll just like demolish whatever's there, because she won't eat the school lunches a lot of the times. So, and I feel bad because we're all paying for it, but if the kids aren't eating it, then we need to kind of take a look at that and see what's up. But she said also too, there's the portion control, or the portions are smaller now than what they were. So the reason I think she brought that up to me is she has cystic fibrosis, and with that, they tend to eat more and more. They're allowed to have all the fat, the calories, the salt, whatever they're allowed to have it. I understand not every kid is. There's boundaries for everybody. But having that option and understanding what we have in our district, maybe that's something that in the future, maybe not right now, but in the future, that's something that we can look at to really encourage our kids, because from my understanding, lunch is the only meal some of our kids get. And that's very disheartening, very disheartening. She was saying, what happened to ice cream? Every kid loves ice cream. So this is coming from a 13-year-old, so, you know, these are some things that she wanted me to bring up, and hopefully that you guys could think about. And this is even my son, who's at Neidig, said to me, yeah, Mom, they suck. I don't even want to eat it. And I'm like, okay, you know, I'll say something, but, you know, you got to understand where they're coming from and what they have to do. You know, they've got how many schools and how many kids? And they're like, no, really, Mom? I'm like, sorry, guys. But that was one. I actually wanted to ask about the math curriculum for elementary. My son is, well, he's a 10-year-old boy. Boys are lazy. I get that. Sorry, no offense, please. But I know that the curriculum's gotten a little more stringent on what they're trying to do with the kids. With what I am able to do for him and what my daughter is able to do for him, and she's in 8th grade, pushing 9th, she looks at me and she goes, well, why the hell is that so hard? All you got to do is this. Why are they making you do this, this, and this for the same thing? She was doing it on the whiteboard. I have a whiteboard in their room. And she's writing it on the board. She goes, what is this? This is like crazy. Why are they making this 10 times harder? She goes, I wouldn't even want to do this. And I'm like, all right, guys. So, yeah. But anyway, yeah, I was wondering if they were going to modify that in any way to kind of take some of that pressure off of the kids, because I know that Quakertown's not the only one. But that's more what, a state thing, that they're starting to become, the curriculums are becoming harder and harder.
It's the standards are harder and harder.
They are,
as
yeah.
they go up for grades. The new standards went in place, drafted in 08, 09, and implemented here just 2-3 years ago. Their math is easier than they were in kindergarten, first and second, third grade. They go back to where they were.
Okay.
And then they accelerate. So by the time you're in 8th grade, on average, it's mostly Algebra 1 standards.
Okay.
Taught in 8th grade, so they are harder. The curriculum piece is what the board approves, and the textbooks that go along with it, and then the implementation in the classroom.
Is that something that maybe that can be modified with understanding that I understand, I want my kids to have an education and go out in this world and be able to function as, strong-minded adults, but to also understand that they have families, they have responsibilities, some kids have medical issues, things like that. Is there any way we can take some of that pressure off of them, cut it back some? And I know some of this, again, starts at state level or government level, but putting that extra pressure on our kids, their brains are smaller than ours, and you can only split so much and cram so much in their heads. So that was another, it's tough. When I look at my kid and my kid goes, Mom, I'm done. I've had enough. Well, I can't let you fail a class because you don't want to continue because you had your fill for the day. I can't do that. Now my husband and I, we have our routines with them. We do this, we do that. We try to make sure that they follow through with everything. But night after night after night after night, it's the same thing over and over. From what I've been told, this is what they have to go by and this is what they need to do. So in that way,
it is tough, by the way. I just want to attest. I'm not saying, and I'll share with you my thoughts on it, but it is tough because it isn't the way we were taught, and at first, I was super resistant. I'm not going to lie. My son was one of the first ones to do the Eureka Math. He was in the pilot to do that. And I'm like, why do you have to explain 5 different ways to do something when we were kids, we just did this, this, and this. And the teachers explained to me it's a more robust way for them to critically think through different paths to get to the same answer. So I think it's just one of those things that is it's growing pains because learning is becoming more critically thinking and kids are needing to learn different ways to do things, and I think it's challenging, and I would encourage you to talk to the teachers, and I think we've made different paths. I shouldn't say we, but there's different paths for math. There's Math and Math Plus, and if you feel like your child may need some additional help, I would solicit the teacher to talk through that. I just don't see, and I could be wrong, I don't know that there's any, I don't see even the nation going sort of backwards as far as the learning with math. But it's tough as parents because I'm like, how do I teach my kid how to do this?
Yeah, my husband will get frustrated because he'll be like, oh, okay, and he's like, well, why don't you do this? This is a lot more complicated than it needs to be.
Like how many lines and little circles and all this stuff.
Yes,
I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes, it's like why is it so redundant? You're going 7 different ways to come to the same answer.
Math teachers in the room.
Your son is in what, 5th grade?
He's in 4th grade. He'll be in 5th grade
Okay,
next
so
year.
they're doing basically division and multiplication kinds of things? We wouldn't even be able to recognize it as such?
Right now, I think they're doing division, and I think they have to do a lot of graphs and things like that.
Okay, so you're saying it's not being traditionally taught at all?
It is, but it isn't, because when they come home and they say, oh, well, the teacher told us to do it this way, and I'm like, wait a minute. That doesn't seem it doesn't seem simple at all. It's very redundant, and it's very frustrating, and I can understand why the kids are like, see ya, I don't want to do it. I'm just looking at it from the aspect of, I'm using math as the example. I'm sure there's other subjects out there that kids may feel that way, but this is something that they're going to be using for the rest of their lives.
Right.
And instead of kind of splitting their head and cramming it in and then sewing it up again, and then next year you got to split their skull again, cram it in, and then sew it up, so it just becomes very redundant. And I don't want to see any more of our kids failing, being left behind, or anything like that. I don't want to see them discouraged. And I think that really does happen, and I see that in my daughter now. And I'm all for what we can do to encourage, lift them up, and move them past.
Okay.
So.
And it's a good point, because we have to think about, too, preparing them for that next step, which could be college, and we want to make sure that we're doing a good job in a robust learning environment so that they're not going to fail. Mm-hmm. So it is tough. I will acknowledge that, because I've experienced as a parent. Mm-hmm. We, as parents, at least in my son's classroom, we get some kind of parent, it's almost like we're learning how to do it before, so we can help them.
Exactly.
So if you're not getting that support, I would just encourage you to try to get that support. And then just really quick about the food. It's funny you mentioned that. We were talking about that earlier. And I was complaining that my son gets to have Pop-Tarts for lunch. I'm like, what is going on? No, he shouldn't be able to get that. So that's good feedback. We are actually evaluating who we're going to move forward with. I don't have any comments, though, on the outsource thing. I've heard that before. So does anyone have any comment on that?
A lot of the discontent comes from the nutritional guidelines for salt, fat, and calorie content, and it's made food less flavorful and appeasing, especially when you're used to eating tastier food at home. But apparently we're getting RFPs because the contract's up for new companies coming in, but apparently they will all be bound to the nutritional specifications coming from the government, which is my rule of thumb actually with my patients is if something tastes good, it has too much salt. So so
unfair.
Yeah. So basically, especially if she's used to having more fat and sugar, carbohydrate-rich diet, she's going to find those meals lacking. But all of the companies that come in are going to be bound by a certain degree of flavorlessness due to the nutritional guidelines.
So go for the Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, bring butter.
You can send her to school with salt and butter.
Yeah, really.
And just so you know, I immediately texted my daughter, who's a 7th grader at Strayer. She said she's happy with the lunches, so everybody's got their opinions. Just so the board's aware.
Feedback's all over the place. It depends on what you're used to.
Yeah.
My mom packed my lunch my entire school career.
That's what she wants me to do. She's like, okay, Mom, now that you're working, pack my lunch every day. I'm like, no, sorry.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Did you get Pop-Tarts?
No.
One other thing I know that was a big upset for all the parents and everything with schools. We have we had one snow day built into the calendar, if I remember correctly. No? How many?
9, 8.
Well, without makeup days, I think is what she means.
No,
it's only one day, and then after that, there has to be a makeup day, is what she's saying.
There's only one day built to do.
but why would we build a whole bunch of...
Sir?
You can talk.
Miss Edwards, we explained snow makeup days because she is responsible for our calendar and building it.
for a lot of different reasons, and there is a fact sheet that's posted on the website that has more information if you want to take a look at that. But for a lot of different reasons, we put the snow makeup days in the calendar. We use some of the blue days or days that would be holidays as snow makeup days if they're needed. We try to align our calendar with the other two sending districts to the tech school so that our students don't lose instructional time at the tech school when our calendars don't align. We also are mindful of the need to have final exams and graduation be a relatively fixed date. So when you add days to the end of the year, if you don't have a bad winter, it really doesn't matter. But if you have a bad winter, then you could have a situation where graduation is scheduled for June 7th and school isn't over until June 19th. And what does that do in terms of determining who's met the requirements for graduation and can walk, when final exams would be scheduled? So for a lot of those reasons, we've used the strategy of having the makeup days be during the year and only add to the end of the year if we exhaust all of the makeup days that are in the calendar. So makeup days are in there. They're just not at the end of the year. They're during the year instead.
Thought. Build them in, okay? We don't use them, we get them back. Meaning, if we don't use those snow days, then we get out earlier. If we use them, okay, fine, then we're going longer. That's understood. That's kind of like common sense. I'm not understanding why that Martin Luther King Day, by the way, Dr. Harner, I thought was a bright idea. I like that idea because a lot of kids don't understand who Martin Luther King is and what he did. So I actually supported you with that. But there are a lot of holidays that get nipped. And I think that's unfair for those kids that have to go on these other holidays and they're never touched. But when it comes to our Easter break, spring break, that always gets hit. Always. Every year we get nipped. Either Thanksgiving or Christmas, we get nipped, depending on how it falls in the calendar, things like that. So what I'm trying to, I guess, understand is when you are putting the calendar together, how much of that is being taken into account? Because we had off Wednesday, they went back to school Thursday, and had off on Friday. Understanding that contractual teachers need certain amount of time off during the school year for paperwork, getting all that stuff done, whatever. But why couldn't they use Wednesday instead of having off again on Friday? That didn't make any sense to me.
Before anybody jumps into your comment, can I suggest the calendar is on the agenda tonight? Can I suggest we hold comments to address that until that portion of the meeting? Because we're all going to have a lot to say to that point.
Okay, that's fine. I'll hold off. But yeah, those are the things that were meaning the most to my family, and some of the others, you know, being around the other kids, things like that. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That they just seem to be most pronounced or aware of, and they wanted their voice to be heard. My daughter having German homework tonight wasn't going to make it, so I figured I'll do it for her. But thank you guys. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Flommer.
Eric Szabo.
Eric Szabo, Richland Township. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the service and all you guys do for our district. I just wanted to propose the possibility of the middle school getting new instruments that are desperately needed. They haven't been replaced in many, many years. Some of them are 40, 50 years old. Usually oftentimes what happens is the high school will get new instruments like we just did a few years ago, and then they'll hand me down to the middle school, right, some of the older ones. But because the previous replacement at the high school was so long ago, I mean, some of those instruments are 50 years old, right? We can't, they're not usable, we can't pass them down. plus the high school music program is growing and expanding, and so there were a lot of those new instruments were used as supplement instruments and not replacement instruments. And so the middle school, Mr. Santinello couldn't be here tonight because he's running a rehearsal, but he asked me to just briefly talk about the need. He asked me to grab an instrument and bring it to you as show and tell. You get a little French horn lesson tonight. Hang on one second. So this is Zach Webb's French horn that he used in middle school. I want you to see that this is crushed. There's like mold or something green going on the inside. The valves are very, very noisy.
So don't breathe in.
So this is somebody's school-given instrument.
So this is like when they come to middle school and they say, oh, I'd like to play French horn. There are a couple instruments. Most instruments are rented from the music companies around, but the bigger instruments and the more expensive instruments, it's not feasible to rent them, and so the school provides them, or nobody will play them, right? And so every comparable program in the area has an inventory of instruments that's, bass clarinet, a bassoon, tubas, big, uncommon instruments that you need to balance out a band. And so a lot of the instruments we have in that inventory are terrible. Now you say, well, the case doesn't look bad, right? But it turns out the case was so bad that we had to borrow a case from Allentown School District. I'm guessing that we're now, a charity that they give to.
Can you get one with a French horn in it next time?
Yeah, well, right. So it's going to cost. I asked Mr. Santinello, so what would it cost to replace our, the inventory? What would we actually need? And he said it's about 150 grand worth of instruments, and it would last, 10 to 15 years. He said most of the instruments we currently have are 25 to 30 years old and are just really, not what we want to be giving our kids. They're hard to play in tune. They're hard to, when they smell bad and look bad and sound bad, it doesn't create for a great music education experience. So I have a bunch of FAQs I'll hand out. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention. And
do you replace instruments on a yearly basis at all, like 3, 4?
No, that would be wonderful.
Hey, I'm sorry, didn't we approve a purchase last year? Okay, yeah, but what the intention was that there would be a pass down. I think it was on the order of $40,000 or $50,000.
It was the initial FF&E money. There's $3 million for FF&E for the high school renovation. Approximately $185,000 in 3 different installments went down to Mr. Parker to make a decision on what he wanted. He rank ordered it, and then last spring or this fall, when we were at the completion of the renovation, there was some FF&E money. Asked him to prioritize, and as we went down that priority list, he got another $20,000, $30,000 worth of instruments, which the board approved.
That's why I remember this.
And so we're over $200 and some $1,000. Theoretically, or not theoretically, the expressed interest when we were doing this, starting it out 4 years ago with this process, that the instruments that were usable at the high school would go down to the middle school.
And some were, and there were usable instruments passed down to the middle school, but they were much fewer in practicality than is beneficial. And it turns out the middle school program is growing too, and as you'll see on there, they're experiencing almost a 15% growth year after year. And so the number of instruments coming down and the usability of those instruments just isn't feasible at this point.
At the middle school, Mr. Santinello has more than doubled the size of the band, and he's done a remarkable job. Now you have all the middle school students at Strayer, and so there's so many students in band that there are different levels of program. So, and
one of the things to consider when you're talking about band at the middle school is that when you get to the high school level, your options for other concentrations of classes is infinitely larger than your choices at middle school for obvious reasons. So a lot of people who maybe when they get to high school might go into dance or theater or cooking or those type of things don't have that option at middle school. So by necessity, your middle school population in band is going to be arbitrarily high because that's one of the few fun electives they have.
Yeah, no.
Mr. Szabo, I'm only asking because I don't know, but would an instrument like that have any value, and could that be repaired?
So it has very little. I mean, you could melt it down for copper, right? The problem, yeah, I mean, yes, you can repair them, but once they get to a certain age, the cost to repair them over and over again
probably the same
outweighs the cost of just buying a new one. Yeah, it's a good.
How much does a French horn cost? Just humor me.
Mr. Parker?
For the Con 8D, the last bid price was about 30.
Tubas can be as much as 6,000. I mean, they're not cheap.
Certainly would be easier if that was just a line item in the budget almost all the time.
We would love that.
Instead of giant, popping up 150 grand every so.
Please feel free to consider that. That would be wonderful. All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Szabo.
One of the interesting, the timing for Mr. Szabo to be here tonight. Yesterday I met with Mr. Santinello at the middle school at his request, and one of the issues was the band instruments, which was a certain board member put him up to it. But next year is yes, Mr. Jackson. Next year is the curriculum cycle for music department, and in there, just as we do curriculum cycles for math and go out and buy a series of math books, music's a little bit different, a lot less, lower density of, you don't have that K-12 like you do music's 4 through 12, and it's just spotty in the elementary schools. So we're looking to put that on a cycle like we've put other things on cycles, like our curriculum. Curriculum's now in a 6-year cycle. We've never had that before until 2 years ago.
Is that a commitment to put $150,000 on next year's budget if we don't do it on this year's budget?
Sir, what would you like to cut out? No, I don't know, sir. Conversation was just yesterday.
Thank you, sir. I believe that's everybody that has signed up for public comment. However, would anybody else in the audience like to comment at this point? Okay. Oh. Yes. Okay. If that's it for public comment, we will move on to the superintendent's report, sir. You're up.
Thank you all, our staff members who are here for their 25 years of service, and you probably didn't think we would be here at 8 o'clock. It would be about 7:10, and you told your husband or your spouse, significant other, you'd be home in about 5 minutes, but thank you for your patience. First thing on is an acknowledgement tonight is Mr. Regal's last board meeting, last finance meeting, and last board meeting. So I'd like to thank him for his service. Mr. Regal is moving on to Haverford School District as a business manager. So congratulations, Bob. We wish you the best. So thank you. Also, thinking about Mr. Santinello and our middle school band, Strayer is hosting, Mr. Santinello and Strayer is hosting a honors band Bucksmont concert tomorrow night, and yours truly will be doing the introduction of everybody. I think we have about 8 different middle schools coming in from Souderton, North Penn, Penridge, ours, and our top students in our band, and we'll be joined by others. And I was there yesterday, as I mentioned, hearing some of their songs, and there's some really good Star Wars things in there. So that's tomorrow night, so I invite you all to join us and I know Quimple will be there selling cards and helping us buy more instruments. Thank you. Anyway, teachers recognition 25 years. as I call your name, I'd like you to come on up, and if you have a spouse, a significant other, a daughter, grandparent, parent, come on up with you. So that'd be kind of neat to share this moment because we're very grateful for your service. First up from the high school, Becky, Family Consumer Science. Becky has done, obviously this is her 25-year mark. That's why we're here, but she's been involved in everything and everywhere, and with from class advisors to club advisors and all that kind of stuff, besides teaching Family Consumer Science, and she has one of the brand new classrooms back in the corner right next to Culinary Arts. So we're very grateful. Thank you. Lynn Rouston, please come on up. Lynn, tonight will be, the board has a motion on the table to approve her to become our new business manager. With Bob moving on, over the last 2 years, we've reorganized ourselves and reducing the cost and reducing the overhead in the district office by hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 4 years. And in that, Lynn is stepping up, and we're thrilled about that, but it's 25 years. And Rachel Damchek. Rachel is our librarian at Richland and Nidec, and probably one of the best jobs in the district, being a librarian, because you're around books all day, and you know I crave books. So thank you very much for your service. 25 years. A former Milford aide who is now at, I believe you're Strayer right now, Cynthia Hardcastle. You're at 6th grade center, excuse me, I apologize. Probably should have read a little bit down further. Thank you very much for your service. Lynn Jones, another aide at Nidec. You've spent all 25 years there. Yes. Are you? And are you going to stick? You're going to stick with us as we're building Nidec anew, aren't you? I know. I can't wait. Good. Maureen, come on up. You going to have your family come up? There they want to. We'll get a special family photo here for you, so you put it out on Facebook or whatever. Maureen Coonan. And here you go. I see Maureen a lot as her office is right down there. Our guidance office is right down the hallway from the principal. So when I go into Strayer, I do my best to walk by before I head out into the hallways to go see folks and to see what's going on. And Maureen has given me a lot of her knowledge and wisdom about things that has helped shape my personal findings on this district, and as we're moving forward to making sure we meet our students' needs, not only academically, which is what we're all about, but also socially, emotionally, and I've seen her in there with kids, and they respond to her. So I've seen you in action. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Going up there with her. Go up there behind her. This is really neat. It was really easy to get you guys to come up. Often it's difficult. Okay, Susan Goodwin is a teacher at the high school. She's not here. She teaches ninth graders. Miss Klee, please. This is Joanne Klee, 3rd grade teacher at Nidec Elementary School. See her often, see her out in the community. She is a former parent of Quakertonians, one who just graduated from Lehigh, and one is at Shippensburg. Miss Megan, she's a sophomore there now, playing softball. She was one of our all districts or something like that, and she's made the team right away as a freshman. So we're a proud parent, great teacher. Our husband is senior vice president at QMB, and he is the person where we put our money in, our revenue. So it's a family affair for Joanne and us. Hey, you need to know these details. Important. Thank you, Joanne. Math coach at Nidec. Come on, Pat O'Neill.
Nidec love. All right.
It's Nidec night. We're doing it just for you, Miss Mitchell. Just for you. 25 years, and where's Miss Plummer? Where'd she go? Hey. I didn't want to interrupt you. You were on a roll.
That's okay. Thank you.
I should have just said, wait a second, the meeting after the meeting. Here she is. She took notes, so I was watching the Nidec people all listening with ears. Thank you for your service. And she's also the leader of one of the crown jewels of the school district, which is our band program and our marching band, symphonic band, and all that. Frank Parker, come on up. There is, I think, Frank works 12 months out of the year, at least, maybe more than 12 months out of the year. I see him. He does the holiday programs with his marching band. He does this in the summertime. I come down and I watch him at Strayer, getting in 95 to 110 degree temperatures, getting the marching band ready to go for its season. If you're lucky, it's only it's just phenomenal what he does. How many, between Jonathan Lechner and Frank, how many students find and own the love of music and go on to the next level with their music program? I know I have a couple parents in here whose children have done that. So, Frank, you've built our program up, continuing it. You got another 25 years. You got a new high school, and you have all those new band instruments. And as evidence to Mr. Szabo, so I have witnesses, we do go off your priority list. How many times have I asked for your priority list? And we go right down there. And we're doing our best to making sure our kids have great equipment to do wonderful things. Laura Sipes is not here tonight. She's a social studies teacher, 8th grade, master teacher, taught at Milford, now at Strayer, does wonderful things, a great leader. Very grateful for her. And she also was a coach for us out there in field hockey, but she couldn't be here tonight. It's unusual because he's normally sitting in the audience tonight wearing her blue shirt, so that's kind of cool. Elena Wirt. Come on up, Elena. Miss Wirt and I got to know each other real well because she helped me put world languages in a very big way into this district. 4 years ago, we only added world languages in the high school. Now we have Spanish beginning in elementary school. And then she took one of the jobs down in elementary school, and she's taking students along with Mr. Finnerty, I know he's somewhere, and as the admin team leader, and going down to Peru. Yep. And Peru, Ecuador, and the Galapagos Islands. So our program is blossoming with world languages, and I'm grateful for your service and your help. That is it. Let's get some pictures, Gary, please. Let's get some pictures so we can do that well. I'm going to get one so I can tweet it out.
You're going to be a Twitter? No way.
Thank you for your patience.
Quick on your tippy toes.
Wow, guys, come on. That's it, sir.
That's it?
What do I have? No, we're going to move that down. Let's go down to the motion.
In that case, sir, we'll move on to the student representative report. And tonight we have Ms. Haley Purcell. Welcome. Give her Bob's mic. He won't need it anymore after tonight.
All right, so currently at the high school, we just finished choosing our courses for the following year. So until the end of the school year, all of the high school students, aside from the 12th graders, obviously, will be meeting with our guidance counselors to verify our classes. So we'll be doing that on Power School. And on Monday, we are also taking the PACT at the high school. And throughout the high school, we're also planning mini-thon already. So yesterday and today, we already talked at Pride, and we're planning the events that we're going to do so we can get a big turnout. In the previous years, we haven't. And we're trying to get events so it'll be really fun for everyone to come. And there's also an office trivia night coming up this month where the money, all the proceeds will be going to the YMCA camp for kids. And there's also the winter formal next weekend. And then on February 10th, there's TSA at Strayer Middle School. And there's also the ACTs, which many of the upperclassmen are taking.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned Minithon, which I know you guys do a great job with every year. Do you have any activities planned specifically for your superintendent? I'm thinking maybe a dunking booth.
Well, the theme is Hawaiian, so we're going to see what we can do. I'll bring it up to them.
Maybe a Hawaiian shirt contest?
Yep. There's limbo, so.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Purcell.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to move on to the standing committee reports. First up is the Bucks County Intermediate Unit with Mr. Jackson.
The IU met by phone last Tuesday because somebody said it was going to snow that evening, and it didn't start until way late in the evening. So, the summary of the motions passed is included in your executive content, and the awesome news, which highlights a lot of the different programs the IU puts on above and beyond the special education items they do, is also included there. They are holding a some STEM classes coming up in March. I'm not sure to what degree Dr. Hoffman is getting all that information, but I know she gets all the information about what the IU is hosting that's also above and beyond special education. So that's what the IU has been up to.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Don't go away because you're up next with the legislative report.
Just wanted you to get ready to announce it so we knew we're moving on. Legislative report. The summary of the legislative report comes from the IU. Usually there's an individual at the IU, Rebecca Malamis, does a lot of coordinating with the people in Harrisburg. She stays on top of everything in there. Her report is there. A couple of things I want to highlight. There is, for those who care about such things, the legislature will take up probably tax reform again this year. The talk is always that they have the votes to eliminate property tax. I'm not about to say yay or nay that they will. That's certainly the way it's going to go. It's going to be pushed, replaced by some form of income tax or sales tax or combination of both. Who knows what they'll come up with, but there's belief that some form of property tax, at least for residential properties, will pass this year, but certainly don't quote me on that. The other big issue, the Supreme Court is hearing a case. Well, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court heard the case, for those who care about such things, about the legislative districts in the area, and forced the legislature to re-evaluate the way the maps were drawn. That's been appealed to the Supreme Court of the country, so we'll have to wait and see what happens for that. And then lastly, a lot of people who follow such things may have heard of what's known as SB 2, Senate Bill number 2. That affects us greatly. Senate Bill number 2 is in committee right now. It has not yet gotten out of committee to be presented before the legislature at all. But what this bill does is enable students who are in the lowest performing school districts. That means those school districts that test less than in the 15th percentile on the standard PSSA tests or whatever the tests that the PDE tracks, if they're in the lowest 15% of those school districts, they have the ability to establish what's known as an educational savings account and to use that money to attend any private school they will. Any private school they will. The money that is put into that account for them is taken directly out of the money that the state sends to the housing district. So luckily, we don't have that issue here. Quakertown is not near the bottom 15%. The one concern, though, that a lot of people have is the portability of that account. For example, assuming somebody in the Allentown School District or Philadelphia, or let's choose some other school district at random, some other school district that's in the bottom 15%, if they establish an educational savings account in that district and subsequently move to Quakertown or to any of the other school districts, there is a possibility, I'm going to let our solicitor speak to this, but there's a possibility that the educational savings account and the ramifications thereof become portable as well. And whereas we are not a 15th percentile school district, because they have an established educational account, they may be able to suck our funds from us because the account was established prior to them coming here. I had asked Mr. Garten to look into this. I'm going to ask him to comment on that particular aspect of the legislation.
The first thing of interest or lack thereof, depending upon your position, is that there are 21 out of 50 sponsors in the state Senate have sponsored this bill. Now, it may change as it goes through the process, but that's a significant number of sponsors, which suggests to me that it may get some impetus to get some version of this approved. The other thing that is interesting is that, and I'm not speaking pro or con on this notion, but it's always been the interest of some legislators to find a way to get public dollars to parochial and religious schools. And it's always been difficult because of the separation of church and state. But this bill permits folks to use these savings accounts in parochial schools, religious schools, besides just your traditional cyber schools or things like that. So this may be the effort to try to fund some parochial schools that do provide a better education in some of these districts that are at the bottom end of the scale. Now, it may just drive more kids out of those schools so that they get even worse and worse, but that's one of the issues in here. The other thing, there are some issues in this bill that need to be changed because it's a first step, and there are issues that I think are troublesome. Like, for instance, if you establish the account, let's say you go to the Coatesville School District in September, and you establish the account, and then you move to Quakertown or Penn Ridge or Central Bucks, there's no mechanism for those funds to be returned. So you can take those funds and you can use them for theoretically other educational purposes, books, or if you're in senior high school, you can use it for college. So there's some things in here that are troublesome. Now, fortunately, it's a one-year re-advertising or reapplication process, so no one could cheat the system for more, so to speak, for more than 1 year. But like most things, people will find a way to circumvent the real motivations of this, and there is very little teeth as far as folks that, including the recipients of the students, to really be able to enforce the rules they're trying to impose here. So this is going to require, in my opinion, a lot of additional work before it makes any sense, and some of those safeguards are included.
The reason I bring that up is because included with tonight's agenda, the PSBA, the Public School Board Association, has asked all school districts to pass a resolution to their congressional members and just to give it to Congress, to the legislature in general, that we oppose this bill, SB2. Speaking directly to the public as to my opinion of it, I am not opposed to the idea that those in the lowest performing school districts should have an option to go elsewhere. That's my opinion. But I do oppose this bill as written only because it's my opinion that the legality exists, or those people, someone will find a way such that the portability of it, as I mentioned earlier, may apply to those school districts who are not in that poor performance level. And we would suffer if somebody came into Quakertown and suddenly siphoned off our funds. So what I'm, as part of my report, and at this time I suppose, the resolution is on the agenda. The question is, does anybody want to make a motion that we support the resolution, or does anybody want to let it pass?
I'll make a motion for that.
What exactly?
State your motion.
Well, the motion would be to stand against United and United Front against this Bill SB2. Am I correct in what you're asking us?
Correct. I mean, do I need to read the entire length of the resolution as written?
Would be appropriate. I mean, I don't know how long it is. How long is the resolution? I didn't see it.
Can't you bring it up on the board? Can't you bring it up, the attachment? Just do it that way? Is that okay?
Sure. As long, I mean, I just want board members to understand what they might be voting on, and there's no reason to read, 2 or 3 pages of resolution if it's up there on the board.
The majority of it is fluff in regards to being supportive of public education, which we all do. It's essentially, in the end, it says that we do not support the resolution, the SB2.
That's not the resolution up there now. That's the memorandum in support.
That's the memorandum. We don't have the resolution.
I don't see a resolution.
I thought it was
It's not up there.
If you don't have a resolution, I would suggest you table this consideration until the next meeting. That'll be time enough because it just started in the committee.
Okay, so do we have a motion or a motion to table this?
I would retract my motion.
It's actually in there. I have it on my board docs. If I have it in the board docs.
It's memo. It's a memo.
Yeah, it's pretty far down.
It's in the back. I'm on page, if you look at the board docs report, I'm trying to find out what page I'm on. Page numbers aren't listed here.
It might be at the top of your screen.
No, it's in the middle. It's right before that legislative report with the gold text. It's the page right before that on your board docs. Resolution opposing ESA voucher program SB2 by the Board of Directors of the blank school district. It's a full page if you like, if I'll read it. Whereas Pennsylvania school districts provide countless academic and extracurricular opportunities for learning and growth of all students, preparing them for higher education careers, and districts have continued to make steady gains in academic achievement, with Pennsylvania students consistently ranked in or near the top 10% nationally on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Exams for reading and math, and Pennsylvania has been named a national leader in providing science, technology, engineering, and math STEM educational programs. And whereas Pennsylvania also maintains a greater high school graduation rate and larger percentage of students moving on into higher education than the national average, and whereas more than 80% of students enrolled in career and technical centers for programs are achieving at the competent or advanced level on industry-based skills assessments, enabling them to earn credentials leading to meaningful employment or college credit equivalencies at cooperating institutions, and whereas public schools ensure that each student with a disability receives a free, appropriate public education in compliance with federal and state law and regulations, when students and their families having the benefit of a system of procedural safeguards, and whereas educational savings account voucher programs such as those under SB2 undermine Pennsylvania's responsibility to ensure every student in every community has equal access to public education, and schools targeted under SB2 are already in under-resourced districts, and state money for ESAs would be deducted on a per student basis from a school district's basic education subsidy. And not only would school district state aid be sent to unaccountable private schools, but such money could also be diverted to higher education, tutorial services, and other qualified educational expenses, not even ensuring students receive full-time educational instruction. And whereas the voucher program in SB2 benefits families regardless of income or need, including students already enrolled in private schools or never having attended a targeted public school and voucher systems in other states have been shown to be vulnerable to financial fraud and abuse. And whereas unlikely private schools, public school districts accept, educate, and protect the rights of all children who come to their doors, as opposed to those institutions that can reject applications based on any number of factors and are not required to uphold the rights of students with disabilities. And whereas public schools are held to strict accountability standards that measure student achievement and academic progress, unlike private schools, which are not required to use the same standard assessment reporting requirements as public schools, and provision that SB 2 would not require participating private schools to use the same standardized assessments, making comparison and evaluation of academic progress unachievable. Now, therefore, be it resolved that blank school district opposes SB 2 and other legislation and any effort from the General Assembly to implement tuition vouchers or any other program that would have an effect of a tutor voucher program, and conveys the importance of supporting and improving the quality of all public schools in the Commonwealth.
I'm sorry, Mr.
May I make a
Jackson,
comment?
I didn't catch that. Can you read that?
Again, it really is just an attaboy to public schools and a no thank you to SB 2.
Okay.
May I make a comment? Sure. I just want to remind everybody the Pennsylvania Constitution says that public money for education should not go to Catholic parochial schools. That's it.
Mr. Jackson, are you still asking for a motion to adopt that resolution?
Yeah, as a PSBA liaison, it's my job essentially to just put this out and see if there's any desire for this board to adopt that resolution.
Okay. And Mr. Akmanowicz?
I will motion to sign on.
I would second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yep. So I don't feel like doing the bidding of PSBA's political body. It's just protecting their own. It's talking about accountability. There's no accountability for those children that are in the poor performing school districts either. So in my mind, all they're trying to do is make sure that the monopoly that is the state education system is maintained. And there's no fighting the monopoly. So any little chink in the armor, which would be this bill, I don't care if it's written properly or if it gets out of committee, it's more of a philosophical point where the monopoly is trying to maintain its superiority position so that nobody can challenge it.
Mr. Kern.
Yes?
Do you consider the fire department a monopoly?
Volunteer fire department?
No, well, fire departments are not all volunteer. I'm just curious. Do you consider the police department a monopoly?
What does that have to do with it? They're not taking my tax money. Why would that be a monopoly? The school district is a monopoly. There's no competition. They get the money.
For the police department?
What's that?
You don't pay taxes for the police department?
I don't know.
You do.
I certainly don't pay the real estate taxes that go to the police. And where I live, actually, we only get State Department. What's it have to do with education?
My problem is your terminology referring
I
to
think
our common
that's
good,
the issue.
Common public benefits is a monopoly.
Well, who can tell me that you can challenge the where your money goes for education. You can't. You take my money and it goes here, and whether you perform or not. My point is their wording about there's no accountability is bunk. There's no accountability in any school district. So they're just not willing to part with their money. That's all.
I agree.
I have a lot of opinions, but I'm not going to share. I do too. Maybe we should just vote.
Okay.
Can we vote?
Just one thing, Mr. Kern, I appreciate everything you said, and the reason I made a statement about the fact that the resolution to me is a lot of fluff is because it really does say we love public education, we don't like this bill. My biggest problem, like I said earlier, is the way the bill is crafted. The language of the bill does not preclude the possibility that this district suffers from some student outside of the district moving into this district and then by taking our tax dollars for a purpose that the bill never intended. And until they clean that portion up, I can't support it.
So why would we vote on condemning something that's not even out of committee?
Point made.
Okay. I guess it's time to vote then. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay.
How many opposed?
2.
2.
So the motion passes
7-2.
7-2.
Tell the PSBA folks that you can fill that form out with the QCSD in there.
Is that something Alice needs to do? Okay.
Board president will sign.
Anything else under the legislative report, Mr. Jackson?
That ends my report.
Okay. Next, we have the policy committee report. Mrs. Weed?
Mine's not nearly as interesting. We had a short telephone conversation about updating a couple policies, and we're required to update these by law, basically. The first policy is 150 Title I, Comparability of Services, and this new policy is a required policy for schools receiving Title I funds. There are specific guidelines for the use of Title I funds that this policy addresses. The second policy, which was updated, is 918 Title I, Parent and Family Engagement Policy. This policy has been updated to be compliant with the federal program requirements in order to collect our federal funding for Title I, II, III, and IV. And I'm an attorney, but don't ask me what these titles all are. I haven't looked all them up. But and this policy requires an annual review, and it hasn't been updated since 2006, and we were required to do this. And that's it for my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Weed. We move on to the Finance Committee meeting report with Dr. Sedicum.
Tonight we heard the preliminary budget presentation from the administration and our financial advisors at PFM Group. They presented recommendations for an initial $10 million bond issue to finance the Nidec Elementary School renovations. We recommend as a committee that the board adopt this motion to begin the process of the bond issue. We also approved the recommendation to receive RFPs for food services and safe schools training. The preliminary budget demonstrates a $3 million deficit despite significant budget cuts over the past year. The primary drivers have been identified to come largely through increases in both PSERS and special education programming, which have offset the savings from the redistricting that we've done. The committee has asked the administration to begin the process of identifying cost-cutting options in the preparation for the final budget. That's it. Anything to add?
No. Mr. President,
yes, sir.
I would respectfully request, because Ms. Doyle and Ms. Hughes' heavy travel, that we, if there's any questions on the motion or to bring forward tonight for PFM, if we can put that motion on the table now.
Now? Okay. Very good. Okay, we have a motion to approve the issuance of General Obligation Bond Series A of 2018 as presented. Mr. Kern?
Second.
Second, Mr. Jackson. Discussion? Okay.
I have one question. If in that bond issue while we're building the school, I know that like with the high school, some of the additional funds were earmarked for other things. Is it something to that we are allowed to consider that maybe those musical instruments can be financed out of some of that, since we don't have the cash?
Probably cannot finance musical instruments out of your construction bond. You can finance other major capital projects, but not musical instruments.
Okay, because we don't have the cash for.
Do they know how much French horns cost?
I gather they have a non-useful life of a lot of years, but you can't fund musical instruments out of a bond issue.
Okay.
Short-term loan you could, but not a bond issue.
But not a bond issue.
Well, last month we just spoke of several major expenditures from the ops budget, such as the roof.
Well, that's why I asked. But
I know, but I'm asking, could they be lumped in?
A roof could be included, yes.
Is it something to consider?
Oh, okay.
You mean like instead of having
did we
that?
hear it was going to be a couple $100,000 to replace it or something last? I can't remember the numbers.
600,000.
600,000.
Yeah.
I guess it's because that comes under capital project.
Correct.
So what are you saying, that maybe we could, instead of having to push off other capital projects, we could fund the replacement of that roof through?
Well, if we're not getting insurance for it, I
which we don't know yet.
Right, we asked for it to be investigated.
Right, we could,
whether
yeah,
it falls
so
under the
repair the roof out of the bond
The
issue.
second thing is,
and
could it be incorporated into the
juggle.
$10 million?
Do a little
Into
juggle.
the bond issue. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying.
That's a good point, Keith.
Okay.
That's all right. That's something that we'll consider.
Yeah.
I would respectfully ask that when it comes to the middle school band instruments, we come up with a game plan that's long-term fixed versus throwing.
If you are interested in adding the roof project, you should let Jamie know so she can price the bonds and the appropriate amount to cover the NIDIG improvements as well as the new roof. So if that's your intent, you ought to make sure you give her that direction.
Question, what's the timing on that where you would need to know? Because that would have to actually come out of the committees.
I think you have a little bit of time to discuss that because we're not planning to have the bond sale immediately.
Okay.
So
Several weeks?
the size of step one, I would like to keep the same, again, to keep it under the $10 million threshold because of the low interest rates. So it won't affect the size, it will just affect the purpose of issue that you put on it.
Okay, but that's doable?
Yeah, that's doable. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, if we do that by the end of March even.
Okay. Okay, very good. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, back to the committee meetings. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Drive safely.
Next, we have the Upper Bucks County Technical School report with Mr. Ochmanowicz.
Thank you. On January 25th, the Upper Bucks County Technical School Joint Operating Committee met. It is a committee, many of you may not know, but just briefly, it is a committee of all the schools that filter to the Upper Bucks Technical School. School board member representatives all meet and conduct business for the technical school like a separate school board. The Upper Bucks Technical School celebrated a nice new student of the month, a gentleman by the name of Nathan Hessler, who's from Penridge. The Upper Bucks Technical School audit report, as you may have heard briefly earlier, we got flying colors and there was no discrepancies that were incredibly obvious and nothing that was irreconcilable. Hazing policy. Recently there were changes. We are in the process of making changes to the current hazing policy at the school. The hazing policy will be updated to reflect commonality and common language from the mutual school districts. So it's just an update. Recently, the Upper Bucks County Technical School received 2 awesome donations. Baxter the robot. Baxter is a simple robot, but its objective is to teach children programming, simple robot movements as moving forward and backwards, picking items up and moving them.
Sounds like Cosmo.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's $16,500 was actually the donation of that machine, that robot, rather, excuse me. Actually, it's a machine. It's not a robot until it's programmed. Tickets to the car show were also donated to everyone in the auto collision class, which is nice. On March 15th, 2018, there's a joint board meeting at the tech school for all the school board members. You are all invited, to my understanding, if I recall correctly. Approval of the 2017-2018 school calendar year was presented, motioned, and approved. We also accepted grants for about $18,500 roughly. Just one last thing. They're considering instituting a new class and replacing the landscaping program, possibly. It's going to be a kind of interesting. It's an agricultural and biotech class is what they're considering, and the credits from this class may be transferable to local college institutions, which is very exciting. And I am done.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Baxter may be a simple robot, but he has a good heart, I'm told. Thank you, Mr. Ochmanowicz. We're going to move now for 2 items needing board action. We have 2 board officers. We have, of course, the resignation of Mr. Robert Riggle, effective February 8th of 2018. So we would like a motion to accept Mr. Riggle's resignation of Board Treasurer effective on February 8th, 2018. Dr. Sedicum and Mr. Anderson. Discussion?
Bye. We'll miss you.
Bob, you did a great job. I'm going to be sorry to see you go, but I wish you all the best in the future.
You're going to pay me more on this one.
Thank you for, is it 8.5 years of service?
7.5.
7.5 years. Thank you, Mr. Riegel. Good luck, yes. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we have the election of the Board Treasurer. There is a motion to approve Mrs. Lynn Rouston as Board Treasurer effective February 9th, 2018. Yeah, coincidence, yes.
I would motion to accept Lynn's position.
Okay. Mr. Ochmanowitz?
Okay.
Would be Ms. Mitchell. Okay, discussion?
Apparently she's been here 25 years, so we can trust her. 26, see?
You mean we were a year late?
Yes.
Oh!
Okay.
That's the problem, isn't it? That should have known that one.
Okay.
We'll get better with the numbers.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on now to the public comment on the fiscal items being presented for a vote tonight. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? We do
I
not.
think there was one that was raising his hand.
Do I see any hands in the audience?
Yes.
Higher? Higher? Please approach the podium. State your name and area of residence, Mr. Orloff.
Richard Orloff, Richland Township. You're going to vote on a preliminary budget tonight, I believe. And I'm hoping you don't blow through the Act 1 limits. 5 of you all swore, or 4 of the 5 of you swore a commitment to the voters that you would limit the tax increases to Act 1. Mr. McCucci, you took this board, the prior board rather, to task for some of their fiscal decisions, but at the same time you did not commit to keeping tax increases under Act 1. A little bit of a disconnect there in challenging them for their fiscal decisions, but refusing to vote. And 2 of the 4 of you, from what I'm told by many people, basically committed or took the prior board to task for raising taxes every year for 30-some years. That would imply that you're going to hold the line on taxes. So I would ask that everyone control the spending increase this year to Act 1. And what is that? That's about 3% on top of a $105 million budget that's existing this year. In addition, you're going to have revenue growth just from the growth in the tax base. And I don't know how many houses that are coming at Richland Township, but we've probably had between 50 and 100 this last year, most of whom which are going to bring $5,000 per home. The Kmart Shopping Center is been revitalized. That's going to add to the tax base, including local services taxes. You guys don't get that. Well, certainly real estate tax. Then you take a look at development, which I'm not too familiar with, but it's going on in Milford Township, and some sparse development in other places. You're also seeing some increase in wage growth. Hence, you're looking at $1 or $2 million minimum in the growth of the tax base coming into the budget. So where's your budget? $105 million over about 5,300 to 5,400 students. I don't see how you cannot figure out a way to live within that amount. That's about 20 grand per child in the school district. So if you want to see sort of a counter revolution to the last election, raise taxes 6 or 7% this year. Do it again next year. Trust me, there'll be a revolution the other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orloff. Any other comment? Okay. Moving forward with the fiscal agenda, we have the Business Services Department is requesting approval of the Bowsher and James bills list for the month of December in the amount of $2,753.54. Is there a motion to approve the December 2017 Bowsher and James bills list?
So moved.
Mr. Anderson and Mr. Kern seconds it. Discussion?
What is it exactly?
Thank you.
I was going to ask.
I looked at the thing, it doesn't give
It doesn't say what they did, it's like, looks like it's just an invoice with
Bunch of
numbers on it.
Mr. Regal?
The Boucher and James bills have been separated because, mainly because Ron Jackson doesn't want to vote on that because they're, because of the conflict. So we separated those and had them as a separate bill list for approval as opposed to.
That was the question. What are they billing us for, respectively?
$2,700.
Engineering services.
Yeah.
For what?
They are
Athletic fields, construction, management, and observation for the service period of 10/16/217 to 11/12/217.
And so they bill us monthly, routinely?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention, Mr. Jackson. It passes almost unanimously. Okay. Moving on to the fiscal consent agenda. The first item is a roll call vote for an opt-out resolution. And what that means is, under Pennsylvania law, today is the deadline that if this board wants to make a resolution to stay at Act 1 index and not go above it, we must make such a resolution by today. Previous boards have done this. Obviously, this is a new board, so we want to give those the opportunity to comment on it and have a vote to see if this board is also willing to stick to the Act 1 index when it comes to the budget. So, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Harner.
It's just,
I think Dr. Harner wants
you
to
have
say
a
something.
motion and a second, then discussion is, I saved the finance so we could all do it one spot
Okay,
here
very good,
instead
sir,
up
Sarah.
front.
Someone needs to make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
That would be Mr. Anderson. Do we have a second?
Make it clear what positive vote is and what a negative vote is. Because this is an opt-out.
It is an opt-out. If you vote yes, you are voting to not exceed the Act 1 index of 2.8% when it comes to our budget for fiscal year 2018. If you vote no, you are basically saying that we are not bound to stick to the Act 1 index.
Let me provide a little information, though.
We still don't have a second at all.
No.
I'll second it.
So effectively, if you approve this resolution, you cannot apply for two exceptions.
Right.
One is the Peasers exception, the other is your special ed exception. And if you opt out tonight, you cannot opt in later.
Right.
If you don't opt out tonight, it doesn't compel you to take those exceptions when you finally adopt a final budget.
It's like a boa constrictor.
Or a python, either one.
It never expands, it just keeps contracting.
You can't expand, you can contract.
Mr. President, may I present?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for hanging with us at 10 minutes to 9. This is the agenda for my quick presentation of budget, and it won't be as long as it's been in the past since we've kind of got our systems down a little bit better. Then I would, for all those in the audience, like the board knows already, up on reports on the school district website, under the 18-19 budget, all of the facts and figures that go into each one of these, the trends, the budget, all the information's back behind there, and historically data going back 5 to 6 years. This is the agenda for my presentation. Priorities for going forward next year: funding the capital maintenance plan for $1 million, renovation for addition for NIDIC. You just saw the PFM resolution that was just up here a minute ago with Ms. Doyle that she had to work for. And then our only add-ins for next year are in the special education areas. The funding the capital maintenance for $1 million, I've been after that for about 3 years. We've never had earmarked money, a line item to take care of on an annual basis, capital projects. As an example, we dipped into the high school renovation money where the project was about $70 million, ended up being about $75 million, and the remaining $5 million was not for the high school. It was we paved parking lots, we did other repairs. Those repairs should have been ongoing. We've had decades of neglect, which the board in the past couple of years has supported administration in studying our facilities, and we know what we need to fix. And we've obviously voted to take out one already out of the inventory, voted to take another building out of the inventory. Anyway, that's that item there. Okay, these are the cost drivers for next year. What's really different this year than last year, PSERS is not the major cost driver. The number came in about half of what we were expecting it to be. We were expecting an unknown, which was a double in the cost. But what it is our health care costs right now projected to be an increase of $828,000. Special education, these are the increased costs. And these are ongoing costs. These are the operating dollars that we're talking about. Increases for a total of $3.367716 million. Next slide. Capital projects, that $1 million would be set aside as a line item would be taking on these projects. Next slide. What I wanted to show here was basically that even though our budget goes up, it's not that we have about next year 50 to 60 less employees over the last 4 years. Even though our salaries look constant, the costs have gone up dramatically. So we have a lot less people, and our costs are still going up. And you can see from the different areas, like the red is PSERS, the next line down is health care, Social Security, and the green is salary. So you basically see in a straight line. This is for administrators. Next slide is for teachers. The previous slide, excuse me. And you can see it's roughly about the same in our projections and in our history. Next slide. This is something there's a lot of slides behind the presentation, a lot of enclosures, and I wanted to bring this out to the board, and so you can see the difference. In I need this since we're being videoed here. I need to stay near the mic. In 2013, 2014, the reason I have that there is as a point of departure. My first year, matter of fact, my anniversary 4 years was just 2 days ago. And I'm excited to be here. Another budget. We're at we were 5,300. Now we're at 5,200 with the total FTEs. These are the counts. You can see the total number of adults we have in the system that are full-time, not just part-time, but part-time is another 50 or 75 people. And teachers, you can see the reduction. This is going from 4 years. The salaries, you can see the salaries are basically level. Why would the salaries be going up when we have so many less people? It's because of contractual costs. And you can see compensation, total compensation for those salaries is a lot larger. So you can see that difference. And expenditures, you can see the expenditures, $91 million. My gosh, we've gone up how much? $20 million. And PSERS. Cost per student, I think you can see that down there, self-explanatory. One of the things I need, this is a foreshadowing at the bottom. This is so I can say I told you so. Down here, you can see next year we'll be at 5,200 students. In a couple of years, we'll be at 4,900 students. That's basically a whole reduction of an elementary school. And so as we're talking about the construction and you're approving that, we've got a lot of really good things, efficiencies that have been created and opportunities for us. Now, and you can see down here in the middle school, we're also down quite a few students, but the problem will be at the high school. What's going on is that with the Great Recession, at least that's my own amateuristic economist theory, is that the Great Recession, we had less children. Our parents had less children, and this is going on across all school districts and all schools, a declining in population, or most schools. But the high school, we're going up. And so you can see that there. David will tell you, Mr. Finnerty's in the audience, the high school principal. I think we have about 150 empty lockers this year. They would go back. I had to bring up the locker thing because that was a discussion at the beginning of the year. But anyway, we still have capacity there. But one of the things that we have to start thinking about is over the last 4 years, we have been, my task was to be, and it continues to be, fiscally efficient and smart and leading the district and doing great things with academics, which the teachers have done for us, and the students and their achievement. We need to start thinking about putting things back, and that's part of the three things that we talked about, the three personnel items that we definitely need. But also at the high school, you'll see we'll need more teachers to be put back in there over the next couple of years because of that growth. So this is forecasting. We need you to plant that seed in foreshadowing. Next slide. That's probably the most important slide of this whole thing. This is... Dr. Hunter,
where's the high school population coming from?
They're coming from it's just rising up.
But
right now they're in the middle school.
But I saw that those are all declining in kindergarten. I don't know.
Yes, sir. But they're being pushed up. That declining population started just a couple years ago, and then that's pushing up
it's
through
like a tennis
the pipeline.
ball moving through a hose.
2022. Oh no! It's like a large animal moving through the boa.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Go. Let's not go there, please. Well, we can talk science, though. Anyway, this model is really important. This is to show you where we were. The very first column on everyone's left is where we were in the February budget, the presentation, and you could see down the bottom there that we had a began the year with a fund balance of $14 million. That's the bottom of the page. And then after the shortfall was $7 million, then we came back, and the PF model projection, if we kept that going, we would be at a fund balance by now. Next column shows that this is after the shucks moment in February, March. And we still had the two middle schools open, but we had gone in and cut out several $1 million worth of projects like we're going to be doing now, and going in and making sure that if there's any more rocks we can turn over. You can see the shortfall down the bottom and the fund balance, how it's depleted down to $9 million. This is the third column. The blue column, I think it is the PFM modeling. This comes from there with taking both the two middle schools out and how much healthier we are, and we have the capacity to handle that. And then the right-hand column is where we're at today, estimated expenditures and outcomes and revenues, and where we are with our fund balance and how much healthier, and then with the projected outlook. And this is assuming, this slide right here assumes the 2.8. This assumes index, not what we're going to talk about in another minute. Next slide, please.
So,
yes, sir.
Hone in on the net operating balance. The third row from the bottom. And it's kind of beautiful because it looked like from I'm thinking of, we're below the water level, so we're at 7.5 million negative, 8.7 million, but we started climbing up 4 million, 2 million, 800,000 below water, and now we're going back down. It's like we almost surfaced out of this morass.
Yes, sir.
Almost got to a balanced budget, almost got to my dream of a 0% tax increase, and now we're, screw that, we're not going to surface, we're just going to go dive back down. This is
I know that's frustrating, sir.
depressing, yeah.
But you saw the cost drivers that we had there, and they're just facts.
They are. So
And so.
the system might be broken, but we'll see.
Yes, sir. Next slide.
Where's the ledge?
Please come back off the ledge, sir. Thank you. This kind of gives you the fund balance surplus shortfall. You've all seen this slide before. We'll move on. This is what the administration recommends tonight, and that you adopt and not opt out of the exceptions tonight, to give us a chance to see where we're at by the latter part of the spring. But the 4.2% tax increase, that's what I believe is worst casing our situation. What that does is it puts away that $1 million into capital projects, which lets us begin hopefully a long tradition of taking care of our facilities. It also talks about the couple positions we need, and also it funds the NIDIC project, which you gave permission for us to begin the bond process. That 4.2%, I believe it'll come down after that, and I pray that it would get under 4%. By the time we bring it to you, but don't know, but that would be the max that we're recommending for this year, not 6%. At the end of my presentation, sir, or whatever. Next slide. You can see how that plays out. All these slides for the audience, these are all online. If you look at this, the middle column right here is for next year, and then all these other columns assumes revenue and tax increases of index this year. So this is the 4.2%, this is 2.8%, 2.8%, and how that plays out. And you can see how healthy we are and how we're not treading water. Next slide. What we wanted to do was to show you what the index would look like and the tax increase. Next slide. We played out all these scenarios so the community could see it, the board can see it. We can spend 4 months, hopefully, if we don't opt out, talking about 4 months to talk about it and see what the community has to say. Next slide. And back up one, please, Joe. This is the same thing. This is 2.8%, 2.8%, 2.8%. So that's the planning assumption in this model. And you can see that with that 2.8% is in that very first line with the real estate revenue. Next slide. No tax increase. We've heard that. I've heard that from Mr. Jackson the last almost four budgets. Yeah, 4 budgets now. Mr. Jackson's been with me. He's asking for it. You can see what it does at the bottom. It says 0%, but I need you to show you what a no tax increase 1 year, just 1 year, what it'll do to us as a community. Here's the 0% right here, 0% going in, and then the impact and how much we're in the hole for our fund balance. We're gone, and fund balance is gone, and we need $14 million other dollars. So because what happens when you have a 0%, you lose that what's it? Index brings in how much? 1.7 million. You'll never get that back. So every year going forward, you don't have that 1.7.
Compounding is also.
And the yes, sir. Thank you. Next slide. And this is a short summary of how all those things playing out. Next slide. Exceptions. Can you please take a moment to read that? We did not set aside money for the high school project. $75 million project, total $80 million in bond sales. No money wasn't set aside for that. As Dr. Sedicum talked about in the finance meeting, and maybe a little bit earlier in this board meeting, that previous boards have set aside money for PSERS increases, but not enough because the state gave us projections, but they were only half right. we're trying to right the ship in all the things we're doing with our facilities, with our keeping our programs, and then sustaining that and creating systems like Going Instruments, having a chunk of money set aside for middle school band instruments, not the whole chunk one time, but a little bit, and what we're doing with our curriculum, creating a system. The exceptions this year for this 1 year would get that system in place. Next slide. You can see all the attachments that are there. Last year, most of these things were created as we were in the discussion of closing Milford Middle School and then possibly to Hickin Valley, and having all those things, those presentations were quite helpful in building this year's budget. So we used them and posted them all up on the public website, so we're fully transparent. Next slide. Now, board questions.
Dr. Horner, let me jump right into a quick question I asked at the Finance Committee meeting. I wanted to ask it in front of the public as well. I am on your presentation you just gave, slide number 12, which shows the trends. The two columns show a gap of 5 years, and that included a line item for salaries only, and in that 5 years went up just under $2 million, 1.4 if I'm doing my math correctly, from 2013-14 to 2018-19. So that's a 5-year gap. You can say what you want about why the thing increased so little, but let's take a look at what we're dealing with today, and that can be found, now that you brought it up, in the attachments, letter H. In the attachments is all in public access on the website. I looked it up myself. The estimated, we just closed 2 schools. Next year's budget should reflect the decrease of ballpark 37 individuals that was publicly expressed many times. I would have expected to see a salary decrease, yet in this handout, letter H on the website, salaries expected for this year coming at $41.8 million, yet next year they increase to $42.2 million. Even with the attrition, anybody else who may be, let go this coming year, we still see ourselves with an increase. I'm going to ask Zach to again explain to us why that's the case.
Sure. The first thing, I just want to address the 37 FTE number. That number was over a 2-year period, and we actually captured most of those FTEs in this year. So that's why you'll see the estimate for 17-18 is lower than the original 17-18 budget.
But the total over those 2 years of 37 is still there.
Yeah. So then you take the current estimate and then our preliminary number for next year, and to your point, it says about a $450,000 increase. The reason there's still an increase is even after you reduce 10 to 12 FTEs out, all of these staff that are remaining, the 340 or so teachers that are remaining and support staff and administration are all receiving their contractual increases. The contractual increases are more than the reduction. So, for example, reducing staff results in about a about $400,000 or $500,000 decrease, but contractual increases are still 1.1 million or so.
So even though we have fewer employees, the cost of the current employees has gone up.
Correct. So to put it a different way, instead of going up 400,000, if we wouldn't have reduced staff, it would have gone up 1.1 million or so. Yep.
By the way, attachment U is a good one. Attachment U has the cost per student and the cost per FTE, full-time equivalent.
You got to be careful about the cost per student and cost per teacher going up. The only reason to say that is because we've done a good job of reducing those numbers. So no matter what the budget would have been, those numbers would have gone up.
Yeah, but if you wonder, both of those are on a pretty significant increase. So it's obvious our expenditures continue to outpace our revenue. Most businesses don't survive when that happens without doing something about it. Raising prices, which is us asking for taxes, cutting staff, which we don't cut staff, but we let them retire, and by closing buildings, we're allowed to, I guess, not fulfill those positions. So we have a rock and a hard place, and then a piece of granite in between those two. And I don't even think I don't think it's possible to find the money. Like, what would happen if we got no money above our, the 0%? You're showing it as if our expenses just keep on trucking ahead, full speed ahead. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, right? I don't know the answer other than, if we just keep spending the money because we have to, because they're salaries, because they're PSERs, because they're medical, they're health care, they're administrative salaries. We got about this much of the pie to cut. I don't know how it's even possible to make this ship float.
Yeah, I'm surprised when I look at the 5-year projection with the 4.2% increase that we, despite all that, we are in the red every year, and our final fund balance is minus $58,000. And I didn't think that would be happening with what we've done.
Is that an assumption that's going to be an ongoing 4.2 increase? Or that's just for,
ma'am, all
just
those
one?
slides have the different options for this year, and then in future years is a 2.8% index.
Okay.
All right, so this goes back to what I was bringing up in the Finance Committee earlier about looking for structural ongoing savings. And the point I have to keep coming back to, because we have different ears, is when we got the initial projections for what would happen after the closing of Milford and Tohickon, so on, we actually were looking initially on that preliminary budget of a deficit about $800,000, which is the number that Dr. Harner seems to magically be able to work within and make disappear through savvy decisions through the year. So anything under $1 million, is not a lot of stress. But what happens is we, again, we had that driver. We had the significant increase in the special education, which was not foreseen. We're looking at the 28% increase in spending in that area over the past 3 years, and the revenue that we get, the help we get from the state, has been gone from 3.9 million to 4.3, where our expenditures have gone from 13.3 to 18.3. So that's the driver. So I had to bring that up as an item that we have to carefully look at and approach with. We just need to see how we're spending it. The PSERs, if we go back to look at it, and remember, I had wanted to quantify the actual number there because I keep hearing the rhetoric on both sides for the past couple of years, and so I went back and found out what the exact projections were that the old board was given back in 2012 and 2013, and it turns out that there was actually set-aside done, God bless you, set-aside was actually done for those years, but it was done inadequately based on the projections that were faulty from the state, and we're looking in the order of 1.6 to $2.4 million a year being off. So I go back and I look at this number in 2013-2014 year, that was 6.9 million. Well, this year we're looking at 14.1 million, and that is that's a bill we can't shirk. So in terms of looking under a rock for more cost-cutting savings, again we're left with the big items out there. Arts, music, sports, transportation, special ed facilities, and then again the furlough versus retiring. Zach is under the belief that we're going to have 5 or 10 less FTEs through attrition through the course of the year. More, yes?
Correct. So the numbers, the reductions right now assume that we would be furloughing staff. You are voting on an early notice incentive that we hope will solicit notices of retirement a little earlier, and then I can factor those into the budget, so somebody who's at the scale that's about to retire is worth more money than somebody who's at the lower end we would furlough.
And you guess maybe 5 people take that up?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Is that, but that's not factored into this, or it is factored?
No, it's not.
That's
so
that's
right,
good.
right now, no, this starts out high.
Right.
So what happens is we have a scary number here to start with, and we got $3 million that has to go away. And in all likelihood, if things go well, $1 million of it is probably going to come through the natural course of staffing changes. But still, that leaves another $1 million, give or take, that we have to find somewhere structurally, somewhere that's going to be ongoing, not a one type of thing, because the projection over this year and next year, going into 23, leaves us, hitting fund balance for, 2 point something each year. So we have to find a fix that is ongoing. And of course, the administration always has the board's mandate to preserve programs during that. So Mr. Harner's put in a very difficult corner to do that. So one of the things I asked is to start opening up our large cost drivers and to line item out the specific things that we do have control of. So over the course of the spring, we can help guide the administration or hear their recommendations for where that $1 million is going to come from, and look for the, assurances that we'll be able to maintain the programming that we have while reducing redundancies and inefficiencies along that way. But we have some agonizing choices to make over the next couple of months with regards to that.
Is it possible, like Mr. Orloff mentioned, that the revenue numbers may be higher than expected?
So we were not going to know that till May, and that's where that's a part of it. And the thing is, they could be lower, they could be higher. All indications are that they'll be within 1% of what we predict, because that's generally what happens. And one of the things that going back and looking at the budget back to 2012, we've been within 1% or so in assumptions for revenue expenditures year after year. So our bookkeeping and strategic accounting has been effective in that. So we usually have a good idea about how much trouble we're in, and Dr. Harner has been able to, in the past few years, been able to find that percent through operating expenses through the year. And so what Dr. Harner has asked us to do is to give him that potential wiggle room for this year to go above the Act 1, and in case he's not able to pull this together. And everyone knows I'm an Act 1 guy. I told him, I said I would lay low and not bring it up, but if it comes to vote, I have to vote for it because it's a philosophical thing. But if it's not voted, I'm not going to be upset or have any ill feelings about it, because it's our job as a board, when you have a successful administration, to go out of our way to make it likely that they'd be successful.
That's a key point Mr. Sedicum just brought up. Dr. Harner started off by mentioning that I annually remind him that I'd love to see a zero tax increase. And I remind everybody else that he annually stands before us and asks for exceptions.
Yep. Yeah.
He hasn't, not once that I can recall, has he stood up there and said, okay, yeah, I don't need exceptions this year, you're good. No?
No,
he wanted exceptions. And the response from this board has always been, no, you're going to stay within Act 1 index and deal with it. Mm-hmm. And luckily, or not luckily, I shouldn't say, through incredible management skills, his team has come up with solutions to meet the budget we imposed upon him every year. The latest one, everybody knows exactly what happened last year. When we sat here 1 year ago to at this time, there was no discussion of anybody on this board, anybody in the administration, to close Milford. The board, Dr. Harner stood up and asked for exceptions. This board, or the members of this board at the time, said no. You're not going to get exceptions. You're going to live within the Act 1 index, and you're going to find a way to make it work. He came back to us later and said, this is how I'm going to make it work. And the community was not happy with our decision, but the board at the time said, we think it's going to work, let's do it.
Yeah, in hindsight, though, it was the right thing to do.
Right, but I'm not saying anything against this, but here we find ourselves again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay?
We find ourselves again.
And now we have to decide, the motion is on the table, this is the discussion for the motion. Do we impose Act 1 index again? And I'm asking everybody here, okay, fine, let's impose Act 1 index. What's going next? Where's the next cut going to come from? I remember in the middle of the discussions last year, Dr. Harnett had about 6 or 7 things that had to meet up his 2-year projection. And the first time we voted, several of the board members said, I'm not sure I want to see cyber school go. I'm not sure I want to see team time go. Mm-hmm. And then a couple days later, there was an article in the paper. Someone has suggested that, well, then I guess we'll just have to eliminate art and music and band. Well, we didn't. You know, we found a way to pass through all of the things that were asked for. But again, here's a new year. Is art, music, and band going to be what we make him cut if we say stick to Act 1?
The knee jerk of any of us is not to cut anything ever for any reason. You don't want to have to make that decision because there's someone hurt on the other end of it. And so we have these 2 main drivers that are things that we have to buy that we didn't order.
But the commitment, the question tonight is not a commitment of spending. It's a commitment
so to get where I was
give us
going,
time to further evaluate it, and as you said, dig into the budget and try to find that extra money.
So what Dr. Harner has asked,
why is there a pressure to get that?
Because there's the caution about if you,
that's what I'm trying.
Yeah, I'm kind of seconding Keith here. Why do we have to limit ourselves like a boa constrictor?
If I may comment on that,
again, fiscally, philosophically, it's a line in the sand, saying this is the budget, this is how much your salary is going to be this year, this is what you have to work within it. What Dr. Harner and Zach have asked is they have asked if they were given a little less of that pressure, that they would spend the spring looking ways to make the exceptions not be necessary. Correct? Basically,
all the time. The budget process is a 12 months out of the year process.
And so with the incomplete information, that was that they're looking for that little wiggle room in there. And I'm always going to vote for the index. It's just a philosophical thing because I think the exceptions are for emergencies to keep the power on, things of that nature. So and it's not an emergency; it's a difficult spot. But I am not going to be mad if the Act 1 for this year is not limited for the administration. But the thing is, what it would do is make me have to be in a situation to watch very, very, very carefully what was done with that leeway to know how much tenacity to come in here for the next budget. And that's sort of the discussions that we've had because, viscerally, I just have a philosophical line in the sand that $20,000 a year is something we should be able to educate the students on. However, I'm also cognizant and aware that there are large driving items that we don't have control of. And with all the hard decisions we made, we still end up behind the ball to the tune of a couple $1 million and change because we have mandated expenditures, legislated expenditures that were unforeseen again, and we end up here. And that's why, even with the exceptions, that doesn't take care of the problem. And that's why I say that $2 million, we need to find $2 more million of structural savings going forward to not end up here, at least on today's projections, because what's likely to come up next year where we've gotten it, where we have a projected, within $1 million balance, and then we end up in the same thing, having to look elsewhere because either PSERS or Ed program or some other cost comes that we have unforeseen, and then what happens is we have to endure the public critique that we are fiscally irresponsible, that we have this blank check, that we didn't plan well enough, things of that nature, when it's very clear as we pour over these how much due diligence is done by both our committee and the administration to try to meet the legal obligations and then some, not just de minimis, but to provide a excellent school within the confines of this budget. But our wiggle room is getting smaller, and I don't know how much more more juice that Dr. Harner can get out of this orange. And so the impetus for the next month, for the next couple meetings here, is to look at a couple of the items that we discussed earlier in the Finance Committee to see if we can find that extra $1 million. But I'm hoping that we do get those 10 FTEs because that will take some pressure off. And I'm hoping that we do not end up beyond that 2.8%. So
can I summarize your concern really quick?
Yep. Can I just?
Yeah.
I want to address your original question. There's no pressure being mounted on anybody to do this. We're up against the deadline. Today is the deadline. Previous boards have voted, as you've heard, to do this. Therefore, we wanted to have this on the agenda tonight to give this board a chance to vote on it. So, you know, that's part of the discussion we're having now is, you know, everybody's getting out their thoughts and their positions and such. So I don't want you to feel pressure.
I'm not saying I'm personally pressured by it. I'm saying the situation is pressured. And so my thought was that, and being the new guy up here and listening to Dr. Seneca speak of the fact that we've pretty much put enough pressure on that he's not sure where the juice is going to come from anymore.
Keep in mind that if we should vote to stay at index tonight, okay, that at least gives the administration a clear definition of what we want, and it allows them to begin to work at that from this point forward.
Right. So which is what worries me, because in one breath you're saying he's done a great job of doing it, but in the other breath you're making him hold the line and saying not go above that.
But holding the
However,
line, something's going to be cut if he holds the line.
So that's what we're trying to say here,
yeah,
right?
Something is going to be cut.
Find the program to eliminate over the next 3 months,
right,
and come back.
But I'm of the opinion, looking at these in both scenarios, Act 1 or no Act 1, something has to be cut, and it has to be cut to the tune of $2 million a year over the next 5 years. It has to.
But as you said, the Finance Committee is going to be digging into that to try to figure out where.
Yep, that's our job.
Right.
Yeah, that's our job.
So I think, you know, for me, and so I can be clear, my position, after talking to so many different people, and I don't think any of us up here want to raise taxes for anyone. I mean, we all would, in an ideal world, love no tax increase. That would be wonderful. And I've talked to so many people, especially in fixed incomes, who are hurting. You know, for instance, what if they inherit land from a family member and then they have to pay so much taxes on that they have to wind up forfeiting that property. So I think it's a very sensitive topic. It really is. I still don't know why we would limit ourselves to our options at this point. But I think in summary, I was going to summarize what you were saying, Dr. Sedicum, in terms of the concern, and just so I'm clear, is that if we give the leeway to say it's an option, then that may lead to...
You might take it.
Yeah, and versus you're saying if we say it's not an option at all, then that leaves no room for that. But the risk is if we limit that, correct. So are you saying that if under no circumstances, even if it meant having to cut an important program, would you not consider any exception?
There's 8 other people on the board, and I will vote for the Act 1 because we have a lot of things, and we have a very luxurious district comparatively for our poverty index, and we would have to be forced to do more with less. But you know, like I said, this particular year, I'm not as vehement about it. I'm going to vote against an exception, but I'm not going to be mad if the rest of the board disagrees. But if that does happen, you know, again, that'll force me to be hyper vigilant about looking at these expenditures through and calling the administration to task to make that 2.8 happen, even with the exceptions available, because that would impress me a lot. I would be very impressed if I saw 2.8 happen with the freedom of doing 4.3 or something very close to it. You know, I want to see valiant efforts in the budget. Because either way, the cut has to happen. You know, $2 million in both situations. The fund balance gets decimated. both of them over the next half decade. And so we haven't gone far enough in structural savings identification yet to produce a pathway to a balanced budget in the next half a decade. And what I'm hoping is it's a little exaggerated because we're considering a handful of FTEs that will most likely not be here. So maybe that number has to come down to more like $1 million and change. But still, that number, we still have to find that $1 million and change. And that's on the Finance Committee. That is our job, is to work in concert with them and help bring recommendations to the rest of the board on how to do that. So,
what about revenue generating? I mean, we talk a lot about these expenditures. Are we going to be generating any revenue from this $4 million turf fields that we were promised? I mean, what's that number?
We don't know, and that's these numbers aren't here. These aren't numbers here.
And also, I think it would be, and I hear you. We don't have all the information, which I think is why we're all like, let's not limit. We don't know, but also just throwing it out there. You know, I think we should look at ways that we can generate revenue with the Milford property.
Right, but tonight we have the motion.
Those type of things.
We have to take a stance on fiscal conservatism or not, and see and give a couple $1 million extra wiggle room potentially to the administration. And
I hear you. I think you're really. I mean, your standpoint is it's black and white. I think most of us, it's not. It's gray. There's like gray in there. At least that's how I view it.
But yeah, this is the reality of how the process goes.
Right.
I feel confident $1 million of this is going to shake out on its
Me
own.
too.
But I don't feel confident about the other $1 million without having to make some decisions that are difficult about what has to stay. We've already made you think last year wasn't difficult for this board? It was, the hate mail. It was a very difficult series of decisions to follow through, and they ended up being for the better for the district. But unfortunately, we're not as done as we anticipated being. We're not as done as we anticipated being. At least on the spreadsheets, it's better.
I think people in Milford would debate that, those of us in the public school system.
Right, but that's ideological. Yeah, that's ideologically.
Yeah, financially speaking, I agree with you, but we don't know how it's going to shake out. The spreadsheet looks a lot better now because of the administration's actions of the past year. That's just indisputable. You see the numbers, the models are clear on that, but they are not good enough because a couple cost drivers, again, reared their head. And heck, man, they're probably going to keep doing so, but we need to decide whether there's going to be a line in the sand on that number or not.
And I think we should consider having our vote now. I think we've had good discussions. I think everybody knows what we're doing here. So
I just had one other question for the administration, if you don't mind, Mr. Klein.
Sure.
So if we give you more time to think, why should I believe that the number is going to come down? What are you going to find out now, in 3 weeks? This
histogram is the past 7 years. Preliminary budget is the entire line. Blue budget's the actual expenditures. The final budget, up where the yellow is, this is actual what the budget we approved and how much we actually spent. Dr. Harner for the past 2 years has actually come in a little under this past year to the tune of nearly $7 million. So this wiggle room here, about we were able to lop $3 million off last year from the preliminary budget to the final, and 2 point something off the one before. So we always find some savings through the course of the spring because there's a wish list on here, and staffing is overrepresented. So I know that it's going to come down, and I know where the first $1 million is offhandedly, but not the next $1 million.
Well, just look at attachment W for a real eye-opener.
Yeah, but
10% wiggle room, 57% fixed salaries, benefits, 30% are the mandated special ed. I don't know where you're going to squeeze blood out of. I don't care how many weeks I give you to think about it, but it's my piece.
It doesn't make any
Okay.
sense.
Just as a reminder, if you vote yes, you are voting to stay to the Act 1 index. If you vote no, you are voting to potentially go above the Act 1 index.
You're voting to authorize the administration if necessary to apply for the exceptions.
Exceptions, correct. Thank you, Mr. Gard.
Not doctor.
Not no.
Not doctor.
There's a lot of doctors
Attorney.
here.
JD.
All right, Madam Secretary, would you like to begin the vote?
Dr. Sedicum,
No.
Mr. Akmanovitz,
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. The no is for, yeah, the yes is to, yes. No, don't, it's not too late.
See?
I already wrote it down.
You just shocked everybody in the room.
Everyone, keep that vote there.
Keep it. Go back to your language.
Attaboy.
No to an increased Act 1, however that's going to be.
You're voting?
So, yes.
Okay.
Opt
Yes
out.
to opt out.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone.
I thought I just misunderstood for 45 minutes.
No.
I even wrote it down.
Mr. Akmanovitz,
No.
Ms. Weed,
No.
Ms. Mitchell,
No.
Mr. McCucci,
No.
Mr. Anderson,
Say yes. Yes.
yes. Mr. Jackson,
No.
Mr. Kern,
Yes.
President Klein.
Yes. So the motion fails
5 nays.
5-4.
Fails.
Okay. We will move on with the rest of the fiscal consent agenda.
May I just ask Dr. Harner? Dr. Harner, as asked by Dr. Seneca, please make it so that we're not in a position to have to raise taxes more than the Act 1 index.
That's to your ability.
Acknowledge service.
We already did the
Correct, yeah, we're just going to. Okay, the rest of the fiscal consent agenda is to approve the treasurer's report, approve the December 2017 bills list, approve the November 2017 budget transfers, approve the December 2017 budget transfers, approve the Schrader Group Architecture LLC as architect for Richland Elementary School bathroom renovations.
That would be subject to the conditions noted on the agenda, however, for that one and the next one.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Approve Schrader Group Architecture LLC as architect for Neidig Elementary School renovation and addition. What the lawyer said before. Approve production contract with RAK Sound. Approve production contract with RAK Sound for the 2018 Junior Prom, April 14th, 2018. Approve photo booth service contract with Big Laughs Photo Booth LLC for the 2018 Junior Prom. Approve subscription agreement for Safe Schools online training system. Approve subscription agreement with Cook Consulting for the App Garden volunteer tracking software. And do I have a motion to approve the fiscal consent agenda as presented?
Moved.
Dr. Sedicum?
Second.
Second, Mr. Akmanowitz. Discussion? No discussion? Okay. You guys must be getting tired. Okay.
Some of this money for the one program, wasn't it provided by grants? The Safe Schools?
The Safe School is a grant.
It is, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool.
Is it?
Okay.
No. Excuse me?
But this is a different company.
The item on the agenda is for Safe Schools. It's an online training software. So it would replace our existing software. It's more robust. It's a better product. And it also has the PIAA required trainings, which our current software does not have. So it's actually going to save us some money there, is what that motion's for.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to public comment on the human resources items presented for a vote tonight. Mr. Orloff? Does anybody have any objections?
Have a general public comment at the end of the agenda.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay. Can you wait till the general public comment at the end? Sure. Thank you. Okay, on the human... Yeah. Mr.
Resources agenda?
Yes, sir. Please approach the podium and state your name and area of residence.
Ryan Wien, President of QCA. To the agenda items on the human resources agenda, I want to point out that I feel like they are a great example of how the administration and the teachers union have worked together to come up with something that we both feel is fair. The letter of agreement for the cyber proposal will allow our teachers to have first right of refusal for cyber work if they choose. That was very important to us. The second letter of agreement for the early notice of retirement incentive is also something that we feel will definitely benefit the teachers who are considering retiring this year, but also would benefit the district, allowing Mr. Shuck to be able to plan accordingly in advance. If he gets these notices ahead of time instead of people holding out, then he'll be able to plan for any of these potential furloughs. And even more importantly, we'll save some aggravation, agony for those young teachers who are actually potentially going to get letters of furlough. So I personally will look to my membership and reach out to these potential retirees and make them aware of how their early notice could benefit our younger members. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Wien. Any other public comment? Okay, moving on to the Human Resources Consent Agenda. The first item is letter of agreement with the QCSD cyber proposal. Second is letter of agreement for the early notice of retirement incentive. Next is the administrative staff. The supervisory technology staff is next. Then the professional staff, the 2017-2018 unit pay, the support staff, substitute aides and nurses, and that's it. So, do I have a motion to accept the Human Resources Consent Agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Jackson?
Second.
Ms. Mitchell? Discussion? Okay. There doesn't appear to be any discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next is public comment on policies and program items presented for a vote tonight. Mr. Spears from Milford Township, I did it for you.
Okay, I don't have to do it then. I'll go pretty quick. I did have a lot of stuff written down, but this is going really late, and I want to get it over with, too. When you're discussing the schedules coming up, I did notice some discrepancies on how Nancy Ann explained at the last meeting how you come up with the schedules and even how you did it this time, where you said you take into consideration what Penn Ridge and Palisades are doing so the tech school lines up. Well, this past Martin Luther King holiday, Penn Ridge and Palisades both had off school. Quakertown was the only one that had on school, so those kids basically sat around for the whole day. So that wasn't considered. And it wasn't, and if it was considered when the initial schedule was written, it wasn't scheduled or it wasn't coordinated for the actual day. So, you know, maybe some more consistency. If you're going to say, look, we're going to write our schedule based on what these other schools do, maybe before you decide to use a snow makeup day, you check with those schools as well to make sure we stay consistent and everything works out. I watched the news last night and I saw the Strayer Band playing the Eagles fight song, and I was like, you know, I like seeing this stuff on the news. I did not like seeing all that other stuff on the news. You know, there was one other comment on Facebook on Martin Luther King Day that it was meant to be funny, but it really showed what light that our school district's painted in. This was on a Bucks County site. It wasn't on the Quakertown one. But the thing was, I wish my school district was as racist as Quakertown's, because my kids are driving me crazy today. He was in Central Bucks. His kids had school that day. That's how people outside our district feel. And that's the perception that I want to try and eliminate. So I believe, you know, if you say you're going to coordinate with the other schools, do that. It won't paint us in as bad of a light if we're the only school out of the 3 that does take that day off. That's all I wanted to bring up.
Mr. Spears.
Thanks, Chris.
You want to go?
Oh, I was just wanting to ask, is that the case? Were we the only ones off?
Yes. Palisades and Penridge,
Okay.
have off.
No, we had school.
We had school, we were the only ones
That's
that
what I'm
had
saying.
school.
We were the only ones that had school. That just looks terrible.
Yeah, it does look bad.
I mean,
But if you're going to do it, at least give the kids the option to learn.
yeah.
Well, that part was good.
That's why I said to Dr. Harner earlier that I thought it was a great idea that you gave the history lesson.
Yeah.
And you gave the teachers that option. That's the only good thing that came out of it.
But we should be doing that regardless of whether we have off that day, right? That's my point. But I like that we did something special.
Yeah. See, I don't think
So.
that was, to me, that wasn't a racial thing. That was someone saying, finding dirt to throw on a wound and reopen it of what happened earlier.
Yeah.
That just makes it harder on the rest of us. So
Okay. That's quite all right.
What happened earlier, though, we're going to have that light shed on us. You know, Janice Armstrong is going to look for reasons to write articles now. It's how
There's an agenda item tonight that deals with this.
That's why I'm speaking now.
And we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
At that point. So yeah.
Okay, that's why I brought it up now. So when you guys have your discussion, you can have whatever I said fresh in your minds. All right.
Here, I didn't think you were here tonight.
You know what? I don't want to speak, but no, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the policy, programs, and consent agenda. First on the agenda is to approve attendance at a conference for a board director. I believe that would be Mr. Jackson.
Correct.
Second is the school calendar, 2018-19 holiday non-instructional days schedule. Next is agreement with Moravian College. Lastly is to approve the board policies that came out of committee this evening. Before we get to moving on this, I would just like to make a comment. We had an awful lot of feedback from parents and people in the community about the Martin Luther King Day situation, the fact that we had school that day. While in sheer numbers, the majority of the people were okay with it, I think many of us, all of us, took it to heart and read a lot of the comments, a lot of the emails that were sent, and I think we have all done a lot of thinking about this. There is 2 actual calendar proposals here, an alternate 2018-19 that allows Martin Luther King Day to be a holiday at Quakertown. And I would like to urge all the other board members to please vote for this. I personally believe it's the right thing to do, and I think it would be the best decision for us to make. So that's all I would like to say. Yes, sir.
For the record, as I expressed a day or two ago to the board, administration recommends option B. That's the administration's recommendation for this motion.
Correct.
Where it's a federal holiday and there's no school, no makeup, no anything except holiday.
Thank you for that clarification, sir. Okay, so.
Excuse me.
Might just have one.
Let's have the motion and the second, and then we'll discuss it.
We can discuss.
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the policy and programs consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Oh, go ahead. I'll second.
I'll second.
That-
One of us will. Both of us will.
That was a tie.
Pick whatever. That was a tie.
Caitlin.
Do we need to pull the calendar separate? Do we need to pull the calendar out?
It's time for discussion now.
The whole agenda's just been motioned and seconded, so it's in there.
I think you need to say option, wherever the option was recommended. if that's
Correct.
what you're voting
Option
on,
B.
because there was more than one option.
That is correct. That's the clarification that Dr. Harner made.
Option B is just the federal holiday. No snow day. It's just off. Okay.
It's just off.
Got it.
Just a point of clarification, I see Ms. Edwards over there shaking her head when I said I was in error of something.
I would never say such a thing. I just wanted to clarify, when we say holiday, it is not a holiday for offices. And the reason for that is there are limits on the number of holidays that office staff receive. And so it cannot be a holiday for offices unless we eliminate a holiday somewhere else. So it has been removed as a snow makeup day. So definitely teachers and students will not be here. But when we say a federal holiday, I didn't want to leave a misimpression that offices were also closed, because that would not be the case.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, thank you. Okay, discussion.
You'll have to, after a motion is filed, or whatever,
Public
given.
comment.
Then, yeah, there you go. You have to wait after.
Mr. Rachmanowicz, you started to say something, I believe, before the motions were made.
Oh, I was curious. The day, the makeup day, did we tack one on to the end of the year? Or
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we did. Just made a day longer.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to. I'm not going to belabor. I think what we've all discussed. You know, I was really disappointed reading the one awful article that put us in a bad light, because I feel like that decision was made last year, probably with, not thinking of being insensitive towards anyone. And actually, I thought about it, and I thought, wow, man, maybe I should have said something, even though I don't know that we could have changed anything in our last board meeting, just to try to be in front of that, because I feel like it's just unfortunate that keeps perpetuating in the media and just paints Quakertown in a really bad light. But I'm happy to hear that, it sounds like most of us are really in favor of making that a special day for our community. And Dave, I don't want to take away your thunder, but okay. But I think that there's a way that we can make this right. We can make this a day of service, not mandatory by any means. But and I hope that despite this being a day or not a day, that Martin Luther King is celebrated within our classrooms, and whether or not we do that on that particular day, I'm hoping, and I believe, because I know that my son comes home and he tells me about it, that we're doing that anyway. And I appreciate, Gary, the piece that you did to highlight all of the wonderful things that our teachers and students did on that day. So I think overall it seems like it was a success despite the bad light that we were in.
Prudence may dictate that I hold my tongue in a case like this, but apologies to my current board members, but I cannot hold my tongue any longer on this particular issue. We have been made in this community to kowtow to those people who are not from this community and act in a certain manner and ways that they wish us to act, because they look at us differently because of the actions of a few. There's nothing wrong with having Martin Luther King as a federal holiday. That's a great thing. The question is whether or not it's a snow day, which is what it was. It was not a day of school. It was a snow day. Ms. Edwards, how long has this been a snow day and not a day off? It's been a while, correct? it's probably been a lot, let me just throw the number 10 years. I don't know what that's to do with the case, but it's been a while. And it's never been an issue, not because it wasn't a federal holiday that we took off, but because we never took it as a snow day before. Well, now we did, and suddenly because of the incident back in October, this community is a racist community because we chose to have school on that day. Should we have had a day of service? The other school districts around the community would say, yes, you should have had a day of service. You'll read in the paper, 150,000 students turned out for a day of service. That's the number I read on this past Martin Luther King Day. That's a pretty small percentage of the actual students who exist in this community. Therefore, the vast majority of those students were sitting at home watching TV or playing on their devices that day. That's the same thing that's going to happen now with this community. The vast majority of those students are not going to attend any kind of event that we hold. They're not. They're going to stay at home or go out with their friends. They're not going to be even engaged and cognizant of the fact that this is a day dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. If they were in school, they would. The talk about some of the people today bragging about and thrilled with the policies, the lessons that we did. So people actually got engaged and learned about Martin Luther King Jr. But unfortunately, because some people outside of this community felt offended, who have nothing to do with this community, this board is forced in a manner to change its schedule to dissipate the appearance of a truth that isn't a truth. And that offends me to an exceptional degree. And that's just my grievance I had to air.
That's not my motivation.
Yeah, I mean,
just personally. I mean, I
said that that was just me.
No, I know. I know what you're saying, though. It is frustrating because these people don't know us. She's, she was offered to come and observe. She didn't. And she's speaking from a place that she doesn't know our community, and that's frustrating.
Well, it was. I think it was frustrating to read the hurtfulness and just sheer hate in some of those emails that people were sending to us, that when you try to find out even where they're from, you can't even do that. So, but I don't feel like I'm pressured at all to change it. In fact, I've been in healthcare since the age of 14. I work every holiday, so it was like a blip on the screen. It didn't even cross my mind.
We may not be pressured, if you don't want to use the word pressured, but
it was. I mean, I've worked Christmas nights, Christmas Eves, New Year's Eves. It doesn't. So to me, it didn't seem like another day and an okay thing to do. I didn't even.
It wouldn't be an agenda item if this hadn't arisen.
Here, I would say though that I do applaud the instruction that was completed at the schools on multiple different levels, because all my kids came home more knowledgeable than that morning that they left. So great job to the group that educated the school.
Teachers did a great job.
Yep,
and our kids, I think, really benefited from it. That said, if it offends even 5% of our community that may engage in community service that particular day, I think we have an obligation to respect that. Yeah. Well, I don't agree that we should do it because of people in Philadelphia or people in other communities where some of these emails came from. I think we do it for the 5 or 10% of our community that does use it, as Mr. Kern alluded to, when his kids were younger and had the day off. Or I'm not sure if I thought it was your email that you sent out, right? That
yeah, our kids went to the Quaker school, and so there was a day of service. But frankly, that's actually a ton of planning. I can't imagine doing that at QCSD.
I'm not saying we have to do it, but I'm saying it can be individualized for the families that want to do it, and I think that's really what we're encouraging here. So,
okay, any more discussion? If not, we'll move to the vote. All in favor of approving the policy and programs consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have a couple of information items. One is an independent audit report, and if I may, Mr. Regal, is probably one of your last official duties. Could you just give a brief synopsis of that?
Okay, that's just our auditor, every year they audit financials. I think Lynn talked about as finance that they render up an opinion. We have a on that.
So a thumbs up or a thumbs down, we got the thumbs up.
We have thumbs up.
Awesome.
There's also a tax refund procedures, tax.
I got
review of the tax collection.
Spencer, we just chilled out.
Probably in a month on that. And audit all the tax collectors. We went from being in-house to having to go back to the tax collectors. So we had an additional auditing on that.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, sir. Okay. It's good reading. Okay. I'll take your word for it. All right. The second item is just a reminder to check the board briefing book, to check for updates there. It's located under the library tab. And we remind you guys of that every meeting, so that's just a routine reminder. Next is communications. Of course, we have the Strayer Players are doing Alice in Wonderland this year. The show times are February 1st at 7 p.m., February 2nd at 7, February 3rd at 2 and 7. And, sir, would you like to add anything, or is there anybody here to speak of this?
No, sir. I'd just like to recognize that, or say that this is January. This is for all the new board members. January is Board Recognition Month, and you're hereby recognized for your service.
They dedicate an entire month to recognizing board members?
Yes, sir.
Do we get presents?
And they double your salary.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
0 to 0.
Somebody wrote that in an email, right? About
That's funny.
You wrote
That was a good response, Austin.
For all the new board members, well, for all the new board members, you'll learn that you will be committing a lot of your time, a lot of your personal time, and besides your public service time, to thinking about and walking, as Dr. Sedicum, he was incredible the other day when we had our vice president breakfast or lunch to talking about the agenda tonight, and talking about how his patients come in and tell him what they exactly think about tax increases, and wishing he was a dentist instead.
Yeah, the dentist thing, but down at my end, their lungs are fully flowing.
There you go.
But thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you, sir. We'll wait for the presents, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is new business of the board. Does anybody have anything new that they would like to bring up and address?
I would like to make a comment. I prepared some words, and so I'm going to read them off. If it sounds scripted, it's because I'm reading it. In regards to Martin Luther King Jr. and everything that we've been going through, I think that from great pain and bad can come a rebirth, and good can come from bad things. And hope that we all could maybe go in that direction, of course. Student service, community engagement opportunities is what I'd like to speak about. With respect to Dr. King and his legacy, the message of peace and brotherhood, and our motto of enter to learn, leave to serve. Kaylin Mitchell and I, Dave Achmanowitz Jr., would like to invite our fellow board members in exploration and possible development of an official Quakertown Community School District student community engagement resource. We would propose that the Quakertown Community School District make available a subsection of their website designated to listing and providing student-focused opportunities in the community to give back for the greater good. The opportunities to give back in service would obviously be completely voluntary. We should and can encourage community and civic involvement by making various volunteer and service opportunities available to honor Dr. King, not only on his day of service, but throughout the year. The goals for such a program: encourage community and civic engagement with respect, again, to our goal of enter to learn, leave to serve. Additionally, we can consider providing students with character-widening education, including speakers throughout the year, focusing specifically on social justice, poverty, and peace. Some of our recommended resources would be similar to the listings provided on cbcares.com. Possibly, we could build an affinity or a partnership with that organization. Some of the other organizations that came to mind quickly were the Quakertown Food Bank, the Bucks County Area for Aging, municipal, community groups and trail committees, the Poor People Economic Human Rights Campaign, and many others could be easily listed. Furthermore, we suggest the created program committee website page shall be permanently dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s memory and his commitment to make the lives of all people better and inspire the best in everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Achmanowitz. Would anybody like to say anything?
I really appreciate you summarizing that, and you know, I agree with all that you said, and obviously Dave and I had talked about this prior to the meeting, and I think, you know, there were some comments some people had made that, you know, oh, we should never force, and obviously this is not a forced thing, but I think anytime you offer opportunities, I know for myself as a parent, it's sometimes difficult to find appropriate, you know, service work for my almost 9-year-old or even my 3-year-old. And I think this is a great opportunity. There's so many different needs in our community, and it does add character to our students. And I think it also can help them have a different perception of people who just aren't like them. And I think that's part of the challenge that we face being in, you know, let's just keep it real, predominantly white neighborhood, community, and not, but outside of even just race, you know, people come from different economic circumstances. Some people are able, some people are not. So I think just having some type of organized platform that we can invite others to serve, specifically our kids, would be just really amazing for our community.
Yeah. There was an email that came from an individual, Dr. Harner. We spoke about it very briefly yesterday.
You have a parent who volunteered to come in and help us organize, and I don't know, do I have an appointment with her yet?
She didn't call back.
She didn't call back, okay. But we're going to reach out, we'll build a program with the board support and website.
I remember seeing that email, and that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Thank you for your support, everyone.
And thanks for listening.
Which brings us to our last public comment, and I believe we have some more people that were waiting to make some comments. Mr. Orloff?
I need to say my name again?
No, we know who you are.
Well, I'd like to thank Solicitor Jeff Carden. A lot of people don't know it. I owe him some dinner from so many years ago.
20 years ago?
Yeah, and he's making me wait it to the end of the night. Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate
favors,
that.
Maybe? With interest, isn't that 12 dinners?
Yeah. You don't expect to be paid back.
Anyway, that aside, could you put up slide 12 from your presentation on the 4.2% thing? Or who's got that? Oh, here it is. Yeah. I just took a look at, I wish I had a pointer, but the revenues from 17 actual to 16 actual was 3.47%. The Act 1 index was less than 3% in every year. By the way, I got to congratulate you. It fell upon you to basically preside over an era of scarcity, and you've done an excellent job, no question about it. So I want to start off in the positive. Okay. That aside, what I would like to see in this sort of a thing is show what the assessment is every single year. That's the true increase in the revenue base. There is, and this slide and the presentation was woefully deficient on showing what the increase in the tax base was going to bring in. There's no way that if you were to keep that, you would get down to $58,000 in a net deficit position. This year alone, we're going to have 1 to 2% growth, without question. You have a $250,000 hit just to one line item alone when Regency Manor sold, I think last month. That's in this fiscal year. That's newfound revenue. We don't know what the transfer taxes are, but they are growing. We don't know what the EIT growth is going, but they are growing. That has totally been missed in this presentation.
The assumption is 0.8% increase.
For EIT?
No, for assessment.
I'm sorry, what?
For assessment.
For assessment. Is it
1%?
So you got your Act 1 index plus 0.8% growth. You have it in there. Okay, then I stand corrected.
1% obviously brings in 600,000 extra.
The second thing is you're not asking the community to buck up above Act 1 index. The community, I think, by and large, supports going with the Act 1 index. You're demanding the community go above the Act 1 index. You could also ask the entire Quakertown Community School District to give up 1% of their compensation. Now, you're demanding a tax increase. You can ask the union to give back 1%. And what is 1%? They're at $94,000 a year is the average teacher for a Quakertown School District, and I don't know what the support staff is. So that would be giving up $940 in exchange. They could demonstrate to the community that they're demanding pay more than Act 1. You know, it'd be kind of interesting to see if you put that request before the union, what they would say.
We are in the middle of a contract. I don't know if that's possible.
What's that?
Yes.
No?
You can't be negotiating. The contract is.
Wait, you can always ask.
You can always ask. You're right.
You can always ask. Most of you, I know most of you, work in the private side. Dr. Sedicum, you're self-employed. I am. My income goes up and my income goes down. Thus goeth my income. You have to live within your means. So I don't think it'd be too onerous to ask the staff to give 1% back, and maybe offer something in exchange, no layoffs or no more furloughs for a year or 2 or 3 or whatever. So I think there's some areas that you could do to bring that back to the Act 1 index. And Mr. Jackson, I'm very disappointed in you because you in writing committed to the Act 1 index and you broke that tonight.
Mr. Orloff, you're incorrect in that statement. If you look in writing,
I've got your statement. You were part of the draft of that. Many iterations back and forth.
Sir, I looked it up the other day. What it says is I support the Act 1 index.
Correct.
Okay.
And you signed it.
But that's an incorrect statement, too. I support 0% tax increase. I said
you didn't sign a 0. You signed an Act 1.
You're missing my point. You're missing my point.
But these,
okay, guys,
get your silly little petition out of here.
No, but let's not have an
comment,
argument.
I'm disappointed in your vote. Okay. Thank you.
You tried.
Okay. Dates for board member calendars. Saturday, January 27th is our board retreat. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. They always serve a great breakfast.
It's this Saturday.
That is this Saturday. So be there or be square. Thursday, February 1st is the Facilities Committee meeting in the community room here at 6 p.m., which is then followed by that's a work session, right, Ellis? Oh, I'm sorry. There's the Education Curriculum meeting also at 6 o'clock, and then that's followed by the work session here at the community room of the DSC. Thursday, February 22nd, we have a policy committee meeting in the board caucus room at 5:45 p.m. At 6 p.m., there is a finance committee meeting here, and at 7 is the regular voting meeting, which brings us to the last item on the agenda, and that is the adjournment.
So moved.
Yes.
Holy cow.
Go Eagles. Thank you.
Any comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Yeah.
We are adjourned.